Welcome, traveler, to All About the Lore. If you enjoy drifting through worlds of heroes, myths, and forgotten tales, remember to like the video and subscribe. It helps keep the stories alive. Now, close your eyes, take a breath, and let's step into another world. Picture, if you will, a world where the familiar faces of the Marvel Universe existed not in the modern age of skyscrapers and technology, but in an era of candlelight, sailing ships, and religious persecution. A world where Nick Fury serves not as director of a secret intelligence agency, but as the spy master to Queen Elizabeth I. Where Charles Xavier runs not a school for gifted youngsters in Westchester, but a sanctuary for persecuted witch breed in Elizabethan England. Where Spider-Man has yet to be bitten by his radioactive spider and instead works as a young apprentice named Peter Parquois. This is the world of Marvel the 1602, a universe where everything we know arrived 4 centuries too early, and where the fate of reality itself hangs in the balance. The year is 1602. Storm clouds gather over England, but these are no ordinary tempests. The sky burns with unnatural colors, lightning strikes without thunder, and the very fabric of the world seems to strain against some invisible force. In the halls of power, Queen Elizabeth grows frail, knowing her time draws near. In the shadows, forces gather that would reshape the world for good or for ill. And somewhere, somehow, the past and future are colliding in ways that threaten to tear the universe apart. This is not simply a tale of heroes and villains transplanted to a different time. This is a story about destiny, about the immutable nature of heroism, and about what happens when the natural order of things goes catastrophically wrong. It is a story born from the mind of one of the greatest storytellers of our generation, Neil Gaiman, and brought to vivid life through the artistry of Andy Kubert, Richard Isanove, and Scott McCowan. It is a story that asks, what makes a hero? Is it the time they live in, the powers they possess, or something deeper, something that transcends the boundaries of when and where? Marvel 1602 stands as one of the most ambitious and successful alternate reality stories in comic book history. Published across 8 issues in 2003 and 2004, it reimagined dozens of beloved Marvel characters within the context of Elizabethan and Jacobean England, complete with political intrigue, religious persecution, and the threat of global catastrophe. The series was so successful that it spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs, was incorporated into Marvel's Secret Wars event, and even inspired an episode of the animated series What If? But beyond its commercial success and critical acclaim, Marvel 1602 represents something more profound. It demonstrates how the essence of these characters, their fundamental nature as heroes or villains, remains constant regardless of the trappings of their time period. The genius of 1602 lies in how it doesn't simply drop modern superheroes into the past with their powers intact. Instead, it reimagines their origins, their relationships, and their struggles through the lens of a specific historical moment. The X-Men become witch breed, hunted by the Spanish Inquisition. Reed Richards and his companions gain their powers not from cosmic rays in space, but from mysterious energies encountered in the Sargasso Sea. Doctor Strange practices not modern medicine and mysticism, but serves as a Renaissance alchemist and court physician. Every element is carefully considered, every detail crafted to fit seamlessly into the world of 1602, while remaining true to the spirit of the original characters. This is a world where the stakes are simultaneously intimate and cosmic. On one level, it's a story about individuals struggling against persecution, political tyranny, and their own limitations. On another level, it's about the survival of reality itself, about a temporal paradox that threatens to unmake the entire universe. The heroes of 1602 don't know that they exist 4 centuries before they should. They don't understand that their very presence is slowly tearing apart the fabric of space and time. They simply know that something is wrong, that the world seems to be ending, and that they must find a way to stop it. To understand Marvel 1602, we must first understand the circumstances of its creation. Neil Gaiman, already legendary for his groundbreaking work on DC Comics' The Sandman series, was approached by Joe Quesada, who had recently become Marvel's editor-in-chief. Quesada and editor Nick Lowe wanted Gaiman to create something special for Marvel, a project that would showcase his unique storytelling talents while celebrating the rich history of Marvel Comics. In August 2001, Gaiman agreed to write a Marvel comic, though at the time, he had no clear idea what form that story would take. Then came September 11th, 2001. Like millions around the world, Gaiman watched in horror as the Twin Towers fell, as the Pentagon burned, as Flight 93 crashed into a Pennsylvania field. The attacks shook him deeply, as they did so many others. But for Gaiman, they also influenced his creative direction in a profound way. As he later explained in the afterword to the series, he made a conscious decision about what he did not want to write. He did not want planes or skyscrapers in his comic. He did not want bombs or guns. He did not want to write a war story, and most importantly, he did not want to write a story where might made right, where violence was glorified or presented as the ultimate solution to problems. The first day that planes were flying again after September 11th, Gaiman had to travel to a science fiction and comics event in Trieste, in northern Italy. From there, he found himself with a day alone in Venice, one of the most historically rich and visually stunning cities in the world. Walking through Venice's ancient streets, crossing its centuries-old bridges, seeing the palaces and churches that had stood for hundreds of years, Gaiman experienced something transformative. As he put it, the past seemed very close at hand. The sense of history, of continuity with ages long gone, was palpable. In Venice, time felt different, layered, as if the present and past existed simultaneously. It was in Venice that the seed of Marvel 1602 was planted. Gaiman realized he wanted to tell a story set in the past, but not just any past. He wanted a time of transformation, a pivot point in history where the old world was giving way to the new. He wanted a period rich with wonder and possibility, but also danger and conflict. The early 17th century, particularly the year 1602, offered all of this. It was the end of the Elizabethan era, a golden age of English culture and exploration. It was a time when the scientific revolution was beginning to challenge ancient beliefs, when the New World beckoned with promise and peril, when religious conflicts tore Europe apart. It was, in Gaiman's words, a nice place to set the story. But choosing a historical period was only the beginning. The challenge was integrating Marvel's pantheon of heroes and villains into this setting in ways that felt organic rather than forced. Gaiman approached this challenge with characteristic thoughtfulness and research. He immersed himself in the history of the period, reading about Queen Elizabeth's final years, King James's ascension to the English throne, the workings of the Spanish Inquisition, the fate of the Roanoke colony, and countless other historical details. He also thought carefully about which Marvel characters to include and how to adapt them. One crucial decision Gaiman made was to focus primarily on characters from Marvel's Silver Age, roughly the 1960s. This meant Nick Fury, the original X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, and classic villains like Doctor Doom and Magneto. Characters like Wolverine and Storm, despite their popularity, were deliberately excluded because they came later in Marvel's history. Gaiman wanted to capture the essence of Marvel's foundational era, the period when Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, and others were creating the Marvel Universe as we know it. Each character's adaptation required careful consideration. How would Professor Charles Xavier manifest in 1602? He became Carlos Javier, a Spanish scholar running a secret school for witchbreed in England, providing sanctuary from persecution while hoping to demonstrate that humans and witchbreed could coexist peacefully. Nick Fury, the battle-hardened soldier and super spy, became Sir Nicholas Fury, Queen Elizabeth's intelligencer, her master of espionage in an age of political intrigue and assassination plots. Reed Richards, the scientist and explorer, became Sir Richard Reed, a brilliant natural philosopher who encountered strange energies while sailing the mysterious Sargasso Sea. Some adaptations were more subtle. Matthew Murdoch, Daredevil, became Matthew Murdoch, a blind Irish minstrel who travels Europe singing ballads while secretly working as a spy and agent for hire. His heightened senses came not from being doused in radioactive material while saving a blind man, but from tasting a strange glowing substance in a cave as a curious child. Peter Parker hadn't yet become Spider-Man in the main story, but existed as Peter Parquois, a young Scottish apprentice to Nicholas Fury, earnest and intelligent but not yet possessing any powers. The villains required equal attention. Victor Von Doom became Count Otto von Doom, known as Otto the Handsome, ruler of Latveria, and a brilliant mind in both science and genetics. The change from Victor to Otto was deliberate, avoiding confusion with Dr. Octopus while giving him a name appropriate to the Germanic culture of his realm. Eric Lensherr, Magneto, became Enrique, the Grand Inquisitor of the Spanish Inquisition, a man born Jewish who was forcibly converted to Christianity as a child, and now, in tragic irony, persecutes the very kind of different people that he himself is, a witchbreed with magnetic powers. One of the most intriguing aspects of Gaiman's creative process was how he handled the central mystery of the story. From the beginning, readers are aware that something is fundamentally wrong with the world of 1602. The weather is unnatural, reality seems unstable, and various characters sense that the universe itself is in danger. The revelation that this is all caused by the premature appearance of superheroes and villains 4 centuries before they should exist creates a fascinating paradox. But the true genius lies in the identity of Patient Zero, the person whose arrival in 1602 triggered the entire cascade of early superhero appearances. While Neil Gaiman's writing provided the story's foundation, Marvel's 1602 would not have achieved its distinctive look and feel without the remarkable contributions of its art team. Andy Kubert, son of legendary artist Joe Kubert, brought his dynamic pencil work to the series. But unlike typical comic book production, where penciled pages are then inked before being colored, 1602 used a technique called enhanced pencils. Kubert's finished pencil drawings went straight to the colorist, bypassing the inking stage entirely. This technique had been used before on Kubert's work on Origin, the story of Wolverine's early life, and it produces a distinctly different look from traditionally inked comics. The lines retain more of the penciler's original texture and detail, creating a softer, more nuanced appearance. For 1602, this approach complemented the historical setting beautifully, giving the artwork an almost etched or engraved quality that evoked the visual arts of the period. Richard Izanov's digital painting elevated the artwork to another level entirely. Rather than using flat color fills typical of many comics, Izanov painted over Kubert's pencils digitally, creating rich, textured surfaces that made every panel feel like a small painting. His color palette was crucial to establishing the series' mood. He favored dark tones, heavy shadows, blacks and deep oranges that suggested torchlight and candle flames in the darkness. The overall effect made the world of 1602 feel genuinely historical, as if the story was unfolding in an age before electric light, when night meant true darkness, broken only by flickering flames. Isanov's work created a sense of atmosphere and authenticity that grounded even the most fantastical elements. When Thor appears, wreathed in lightning and wielding Mjolnir, he looks like a figure from myth-made flesh. When the four from the fantastic use their powers, the energy effects feel both magical and real, as if you could feel the heat from Johnny Storm's flames or the chill from Susan Storm's invisible airform body. The Witchbreed's powers are rendered with a similar sense of wonder tinged with menace, appropriate for an age that would view such abilities as either divine gifts or demonic corruption. But perhaps the most striking visual elements of Marvel 1602 are Scott McCowan's covers. McCowan employed a technique called scratchboard, a method where the artist uses sharp tools to scrape away black ink from a prepared white surface, essentially drawing in white lines on a black background. This reversal of the normal drawing process creates an effect that closely resembles copperplate engraving, a printing technique that was actually in use during the early 17th century. McCowan's covers are masterpieces of design and execution. Each one depicts key characters or scenes from the issue, but rendered in a style that would not look out of place in a book published in 1602 itself. He added scrolls and banners with the issue titles, mimicking Renaissance paintings where text scrolls provided context or commentary on the images. For inspiration, McCowan studied actual engravings from the 17th century, capturing not just the technique but the aesthetic sensibility of the era. The hardcover edition of Marvel 1602 features a particularly striking cover image showing multiple characters whispering conspiratorially to one another. McCowan revealed that this image was directly inspired by contemporary depictions of the Gunpowder Plot conspirators, the group who attempted to blow up Parliament and assassinate King James in 1605, just 3 years after the story's setting. Since the heroes of 1602 are all, in James's eyes, traitors conspiring against the crown, depicting them like the Gunpowder Plotters added another layer of historical resonance. The combination of Gaiman's meticulously researched writing, Kubert's dynamic pencils, Izanov's atmospheric painting, and McCowan's period-perfect covers created a complete aesthetic package. Marvel 1602 doesn't just tell you it's set in the past, it shows you, makes you feel it in every panel. The visual storytelling reinforces and enhances the written narrative at every turn, making the alternate world feel fully realized and lived in. To fully appreciate Marvel 1602, one must understand the actual historical period in which it's set. The year 1602 was a pivotal moment in English and European history, a time of transition and uncertainty that made it the perfect backdrop for Gaiman's story. In England, Queen Elizabeth I was in her 69th year, having ruled for 44 years. Her reign, known as the Elizabethan era, is often considered a golden age of English history. Under her rule, England had defeated the Spanish Armada, established itself as a naval power, supported the early colonization of the Americas, and experienced a flowering of arts and literature that produced William Shakespeare, Christopher Marlowe, and numerous other cultural luminaries. But by 1602, Elizabeth was old, ill, and childless. The question of succession loomed over the realm like a sword suspended by a thread. Elizabeth refused to formally name her successor, partly from superstition, partly from political calculation. But it was generally understood that the throne would pass to King James VI of Scotland, her nearest Protestant relative, and the son of her executed rival, Mary, Queen of Scots. James represented both continuity and change. As a Protestant, he maintained England's break with Rome. But he was Scottish. He believed fervently in the divine right of kings, and he had very different views from Elizabeth on many matters of governance. His accession would mark not just a new reign, but the end of an era. The religious situation in Europe was extraordinarily complex and dangerous in 1602. The Protestant Reformation had fractured Christendom, leading to decades of religious warfare. The Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478, was at the height of its power, investigating and punishing heresy, conducting trials, and executing those it deemed threats to Catholic orthodoxy. The Inquisition's reach extended across Spain's vast empire and influenced Catholic regions throughout Europe. Protestants, Jews, Muslims, and anyone else who deviated from approved Catholic doctrine faced persecution. England itself was officially Protestant following Henry VIII's break with Rome and the establishment of the Church of England. But English Catholics faced restrictions and suspicion, especially after various plots to overthrow Elizabeth and restore Catholic rule. The atmosphere was one of religious tension and paranoia, where accusations of heresy or treason could lead to imprisonment, torture, or death. The Gunpowder Plot of 1605, where Catholic conspirators attempted to blow up Parliament, would demonstrate how volatile the religious situation remained. Beyond religious conflict, the world was expanding in ways both literal and intellectual. European powers were exploring and colonizing the Americas, Asia, and Africa. English colonies were being established in the New World, though many faced tremendous difficulties. The Roanoke colony, featured prominently in Marvel 1602, had a mysterious real history. Established in what is now North Carolina in the 1580s, the colony disappeared without a trace. When English ships returned to Roanoke after several years away, they found the settlement abandoned, with only the word Croatoan carved into a post. The fate of the colonists, including Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America, remains one of history's unsolved mysteries. In the realm of ideas, the late Renaissance and early scientific revolution were beginning to transform how people understood the world. Figures like Galileo were challenging ancient assumptions about astronomy and physics. Natural philosophers were conducting experiments, making observations, and developing theories that would eventually supplant medieval scholasticism. It was a time when the old and new existed side by side, when alchemists sought to transmute lead into gold while also laying the groundwork for modern chemistry, when belief in witchcraft and demons coexisted with emerging rational inquiry. This rich historical context provided Gaiman with countless elements to weave into his narrative. The religious persecution of the Inquisition maps perfectly onto the persecution of witch-breed mutants. Queen Elizabeth's impending death and the uncertainty of James's succession create political instability that villains can exploit. The mystery of the Roanoke colony becomes a key location in the story. The intellectual ferment of the age allows for characters like Stephen Strange and Richard Reed to exist as credible scholars and investigators of natural phenomena. But Gaiman also took creative liberties, bending history to serve the story. In the real timeline, Elizabeth would die in March 1603, about a year after the story's setting. In 1602, she dies earlier, assassinated by agents of Count Otto von Doom. James becomes king sooner, and his reign takes a darker turn thanks to the presence of supervillains whispering in his ear. The Roanoke colony, which vanished in reality, survives in 1602, saved by the intervention of a time-displaced Captain America. These changes ripple outward, creating an alternate history that feels plausible even as it diverges from reality. The world of 1602 is also different in more fundamental ways. Dinosaurs roam the Americas, the remnants of the savage land that exists in the Marvel universe. The seas hold mysterious energies that can transform human beings into elemental forces. Magic works, not just as superstition or illusion, but as a real force that individuals like Stephen Strange can study and wield. Mutants, witchbreed, are being born with powers that mark them as either blessed or cursed, depending on one's perspective. Yet despite these fantastical elements, the world of 1602 feels grounded and real. The attention to historical detail, the careful integration of Marvel elements into period-appropriate contexts, and the artwork's evocative presentation all combine to create verisimilitude. We believe in this world, even as we recognize its impossibility. That suspension of disbelief is the hallmark of great alternate history storytelling, and Marvel 1602 achieves it brilliantly. At the heart of Marvel 1602 lies a mystery that unfolds gradually across the 8 issues. Strange weather plagues the world, particularly England. The skies burn with unnatural colors. Storms appear and vanish without pattern. Those sensitive to such things, like Dr. Stephen Strange, sense that something is fundamentally wrong with the universe itself. The fabric of reality is straining, warping, threatening to tear apart entirely. And somehow, the appearance of individuals with extraordinary abilities, the Witchbreed and others, is connected to this cosmic catastrophe. Stephen Strange, serving as Queen Elizabeth's physician and court magician, is one of the first to recognize the danger. Through his mystical studies and communication with Uatu the Watcher, a being from beyond Earth who observes human affairs, Strange comes to understand that the universe is experiencing a temporal anomaly. Something has entered the timeline that should not be there, something from another time, and its presence is causing a cascade of effects that will destroy everything unless the anomaly can be corrected. The revelation, when it comes, is both surprising and perfectly logical in retrospect. The cause of the temporal disaster is Captain America, Steve Rogers, but not the Captain America of this timeline. He is a visitor from the future, from a dystopian 21st century where a dictator called the President for Life, strongly implied to be the Purple Man using his mind control powers, has seized control of America and hunts down superheroes. In that dark future, an aging Captain America continued to fight against tyranny, one of the last heroes still standing. When the President for Life's forces finally captured him, they attempted to execute him using advanced temporal technology, not to kill him, but to erase him from time itself, preventing him from ever inspiring others to resist. The execution went wrong. Instead of being erased, Captain America was thrown backward through time, arriving in the late 16th century in the Americas. He emerged in the year 1587, confused and disoriented, his memories foggy from the temporal displacement. He encountered a Native American tribe and was taken in by them, learning their ways and adopting a new identity, Rojhaz, a name that the tribe heard when he tried to pronounce his surname, Rogers. Over time, the colonists came to believe he was one of the legendary Welsh Indians, descendants of Welsh explorers who supposedly reached America before Columbus, which explained his European appearance among Native Americans. Rojhaz's arrival in 1587 was the triggering event that set everything else in motion. His presence in the past created a temporal rift, a tear in the fabric of space-time. This rift began radiating a form of chronological energy, and this energy had a strange effect on human beings. It accelerated the appearance of superhumans by 4 centuries. People who, in the natural course of history, would not have been born until the 20th century began appearing in the 16th and 17th centuries instead. Witchbreed mutants started being born. Scientific experiments that should not have succeeded until the atomic age produced fantastical results. Ancient artifacts of power, like Mjolnir, became active earlier than they should. Rojhaz himself didn't understand what he had done. He only knew that he had been given a second chance, an opportunity to be present at the birth of a new nation in the Americas, and to help guide it toward a better future than the one he had left. When he encountered the struggling Roanoke colonists in their first winter, facing starvation and disease, he intervened. He and his tribal companions provided food and taught survival skills. The colony that should have vanished, its fate unknown, instead survived and grew. Among those colonists was an infant named Virginia Dare, the first English child born in America. To Rojhaz, she represented hope, the promise of a better future. He determined to protect her at all costs, seeing in her the symbolic beginning of the America he believed in, rather than the dystopia he had escaped. As Virginia grew, she was exposed to the energies of the temporal rift that Rojhaz's presence generated. At age 8, while playing near the rift, she touched it, and the chronological energies fundamentally changed her. She gained the ability to transform into white-furred animals, a power she initially couldn't control, transforming when frightened or upset. Rojhaz was there each time, tracking her animal form and keeping her safe until she changed back, never revealing her secret to others. By 1602, 15 years after Rojhaz's arrival, the temporal strain on the universe had reached critical levels. The rift he created was growing, destabilizing reality itself. If left unchecked, it would eventually expand to consume everything, destroying not just Earth, but potentially the entire universe. Yet the paradox was cruel. Rojhaz could not simply return to his own time. The technology to do so no longer existed in 1602, and his memories of his original timeline had faded. He had built a new life, found a new purpose. The idea of abandoning Virginia and the colonists felt like betrayal. The heroes of 1602 gradually pieced together the truth. Dr. Strange, with information from Uatu the Watcher, understood the nature of the temporal rift and what needed to be done. Sir Nicholas Fury, practical and mission-focused, accepted that hard choices would be necessary. Carlos Javier sensed the disturbance and offered his assistance. Together, they orchestrated a desperate plan. They had to bring Rojhaz to the temporal rift and send him forward through time, returning him to approximately when he left. This would seal the rift, stabilize the timeline, and save the universe. But the solution came with terrible costs. Returning Rojhaz to his original time would restore the proper timeline. The world of 1602, with all its heroes and struggles, would cease to exist. Everyone who had been born early because of the temporal anomaly would never exist. Their lives, their choices, their relationships would be unmade. It was, in essence, a death sentence for an entire universe, even if that universe was itself an aberration that should never have existed. The ethical weight of this decision hung heavily over the climax. Rojhaz resisted, not wanting to abandon the people he had come to love, especially Virginia. Nicholas Fury, making the hardest choice of his life, ultimately knocked Rojhaz unconscious and carried him into the rift, sacrificing himself to save reality. The act required Fury to enter the rift as well, traveling forward in time to an unknown fate. For all his pragmatism, Fury made a heroic sacrifice, giving up his own life and world to preserve the greater universe. Yet, in a final twist, the universe was not entirely unmade. Uatu the Watcher, who had observed these events and felt shame at how the temporal crisis had endangered all reality, convinced his fellow Watchers to preserve the world of 1602 as a pocket universe, separate from the main timeline, but allowed to continue existing. In this preserved reality, the heroes and their struggles mattered. Their stories would continue. But they would do so in isolation, a complete universe unto itself, designated by multiversal catalogers as Earth 311. The heroes of Marvel 1602 are both familiar and startlingly different from their mainstream Marvel counterparts. Each has been carefully reimagined to fit the historical setting while maintaining the essential characteristics that define them. Let us examine the major heroes and how they manifest in this alternate world. Sir Nicholas Fury stands at the center of much of the action. In the main Marvel universe, Nick Fury is the grizzled soldier and super spy who led the Howling Commandos in World War II and later became director of SHIELD, Marvel's premier intelligence and defense organization. In 1602, he is Queen Elizabeth's intelligencer, the master of her network of spies and informants. He is a man who operates in shadows, who knows the secrets that keep kingdoms standing or bring them crashing down. Gaiman's Fury retains all the key characteristics of the mainstream version. He is practical to the point of ruthlessness, willing to make hard choices that others would shrink from. He is loyal to his sovereign and to the greater good, even when the two conflict. He is a skilled fighter and tactician, capable of leading men into battle or orchestrating complex espionage operations. But he's also older, wearier, aware that the world he has fought to protect is changing in ways he cannot fully control. When Queen Elizabeth is assassinated and King James takes the throne, Fury finds himself serving a monarch who distrusts him and whose vision for England he opposes. Yet still he does his duty, until duty requires him to betray his king to save the universe itself. Fury's relationship with his young apprentice, Peter Parquois, echoes his mentorship of various young heroes in mainstream Marvel. He sees potential in the Scottish lad, a quick mind and good heart. He trains Peter in spycraft, teaches him to observe and deduce, gives him responsibilities, and trusts him with secrets. There's a gruff affection there, though Fury would never openly express it. Peter, for his part, admires Fury tremendously, seeing him as everything brave and capable that he himself hopes to become. Dr. Stephen Strange occupies a unique position as both Elizabeth's personal physician and her court magician. In the main Marvel universe, Strange is the sorcerer supreme, master of the mystical arts and defender of Earth against supernatural threats. In 1602, magic and medicine are not yet entirely separate disciplines. Strange is both a learned man of science, understanding anatomy and herbal remedies, and a practitioner of mystic arts, capable of astral projection, communing with beings from other dimensions, and sensing disturbances in the natural order. Strange is portrayed as older and more established than his mainstream counterpart. He has served Elizabeth for years, earning her trust and gratitude. But he is also aware of how precarious his position is. In an age where accusations of witchcraft can lead to execution, a known magician survives only through the protection of the powerful. When James becomes king, Strange knows his days are numbered. The new king has no love for sorcery and views Strange with suspicion and fear. Strange's most important relationship is with his wife, Clea. In mainstream Marvel, Clea is a sorceress from the dark dimension, a realm of magic and nightmare. In 1602, her otherworldly origins are maintained, though described more mystically. She is from another realm, served as queen there before circumstances brought her to Earth. She assists Strange in his work, providing both practical support and mystical knowledge. When Strange is arrested and executed by King James's order, Clea becomes the primary carrier of his final messages, helping the other heroes understand what must be done to save the universe. Strange's execution is one of the story's most powerful moments. Even knowing he will die, even aware that the timeline might be unmade, he continues working to save the world. After his death, his head is placed on a pike on London Bridge, a grim warning to others who would practice forbidden arts. But through his magic, Strange's spirit remains connected to his severed head, allowing him to continue communicating with Clea and others. It's a macabre yet touching detail, showing that even in death, Strange serves. Virginia Dare represents something unique in Marvel 1602, a character without a direct Marvel Universe counterpart. The real Virginia Dare was indeed the first English child born in America at the Roanoke colony in 1587. She would have been 15 in 1602, though in reality, she likely perished with the rest of the lost colony. Gaiman uses her as a symbolic figure, the promise of the new world, but also gives her an important active role in the story rather than making her merely symbolic. Virginia's powers, the ability to transform into white-furred animals, make her something like a combination of various shape-shifting Marvel characters. Neil Gaiman denied that she was based on Snowbird from Alpha Flight, despite the similarities. Instead, he drew inspiration from the legend of Virginia Dare, particularly a poem by Sally Southall Cotton called The White Doe, which tells how Virginia was transformed into a white deer. In Marvel 1602, Virginia can become various white animals: a deer, a mountain lion, a horse, a griffin-like creature, a hound. Initially, these transformations happen involuntarily when she's frightened or upset. Over time, she learns control, becoming able to shift at will and choosing which form to take. Virginia's relationship with Rojhaz is central to her character and to the plot. He has been her protector since childhood, the guardian who tracked her through the wilderness when she transformed uncontrollably, who kept her secret from those who would call her a witch. She loves him not just as a guardian, but romantically, though their relationship remains chaste. She sees him as heroic and noble, unaware that his very presence in her time is destroying the universe. When the truth emerges, when she learns that Rojhaz must be sent away to save reality, her heartbreak is profound. She is willing to sacrifice her own existence for the greater good, but the loss of Rojhaz feels like losing everything that matters. In the preserved pocket universe that continues after the main story, Virginia survives and continues her adventures in the sequel series. Her character develops further, becoming more confident in her powers and her role as both a warrior and a symbol. But that thread-the-needle combination of strength and vulnerability established in the original series remains central to who she is. Matthew Murdock presents one of the most successful adaptations in Marvel 1602. In mainstream Marvel, Matt Murdock is a blind lawyer who fights crime as the vigilante Daredevil, using his superhuman senses to compensate for his lack of sight. In 1602, he is Matthew Murdock, a blind Irish minstrel who travels Europe singing ballads and playing musical instruments. But his role as a wandering performer is also perfect cover for espionage, allowing him to move freely across borders and enter places where soldiers or obvious spies would be turned away. The story of how Murdock lost his sight and gained his heightened senses is adapted cleverly. As a curious child exploring caves in Ireland, he found a glowing substance seeping from the rock. Against all wisdom, he tasted it, and the alien chemicals destroyed his optic nerves while enhancing all his other senses to extraordinary levels. He can hear a heartbeat from across a room, sense the heat of a nearby body, feel the vibrations of footsteps through the floor. These abilities make him formidable as both spy and combatant, capable of navigating and fighting despite his blindness. Murdock's moral complexity is maintained from his mainstream counterpart. He is a Catholic in Protestant England, which puts him under automatic suspicion. He works for hire as an assassin and spy, taking money from various clients, which raises questions about his heroism. Yet, he maintains his own code, refusing jobs that violate his principles and often working secretly against the interests of villains who employ him. His relationship with Natasha, a Russian spy and occasional lover, mirrors his complicated romantic entanglements in mainstream Marvel, particularly his relationship with Elektra. When Murdock is captured and interrogated by Count Otto von Doom, then imprisoned by King James, his resilience and resourcefulness shine through. Even blind, even chained in a cell, he remains dangerous and determined. His senses allow him to understand his environment completely, to know where his captors are and what they're planning. When opportunity presents itself, he escapes and continues his mission. He embodies the idea that disability does not equal inability, that heroism comes from choices in character rather than physical perfection. Peter Parquag is not yet Spider-Man when the main story of 1602 begins, but his journey toward that destiny is set in motion. In mainstream Marvel, Peter Parker is a nerdy high school student who gains spider powers after being bitten by a radioactive spider at a science exhibition. In 1602, Peter is a young Scottish man, perhaps 17 or 18 years old, serving as an apprentice and assistant to Sir Nicholas Fury. He is intelligent and observant, capable of making deductions and connections that others miss. He's also earnest and idealistic, believing in justice and heroism in ways that Fury's cynicism has eroded. Peter's role in the story is largely that of the viewpoint character, the ordinary person through whom readers experience extraordinary events. He accompanies Fury on various missions, carries messages, gathers intelligence, and occasionally finds himself in danger. His youth and relative innocence make him sympathetic, someone readers can identify with even as heroes and villains clash around him. The moment that will define Peter's future comes at the story's climax, after the temporal rift has been sealed and Rojhaz sent forward in time. In the aftermath, Peter and several other characters find themselves near the epicenter where the rift existed. A small spider, mutated by lingering energies from the temporal anomaly, bites Peter on the hand. The venom enters his bloodstream, and though he doesn't realize it immediately, his transformation has begun. By the end of the series, Peter is developing strange abilities, enhanced strength, the ability to cling to walls, heightened reflexes, and a mysterious sixth sense that warns him of danger. The spider bite represents the universe course-correcting. Rojhaz's presence caused superhumans to appear early, but his removal didn't erase all the changes. Some individuals were still exposed to transformative energies or substances. Peter was always meant to become Spider-Man, and now, even in this alternate timeline preserved as a pocket universe, he will fulfill that destiny. The sequels would explore Peter's development into Spider-Man in the world of 1602, facing villains and challenges appropriate to the setting. The X-Men are reimagined in Marvel 1602 as the Witchbreed, individuals born with extraordinary abilities that mark them as different from normal humans. The name is perfect for the era, evoking both witchcraft and the idea of breeding or genetic difference. In an age of religious fervor and superstition, those with visible mutations or inexplicable powers would naturally be seen as touched by either God or the devil, and most would assume the latter. Carlos Javier is the 1602 version of Professor Charles Xavier, founder of the X-Men and one of the most powerful telepaths in the Marvel Universe. In this alternate timeline, he is a Spanish scholar who has established a school in England, ostensibly an academy for the education of young people, but secretly a refuge for witchbreed fleeing persecution. Javier himself is a witchbreed with telepathic and telekinetic abilities, capable of reading minds, projecting thoughts and moving objects through mental force alone. Javier's school operates in constant danger. England under Elizabeth has been relatively tolerant, allowing him to exist provided he remains discreet. But the Spanish Inquisition hunts witchbreed actively, viewing them as abominations to be purged. When King James takes the throne, the situation in England deteriorates rapidly. James shares the Inquisition's views on witchbreed, seeing them as creatures of darkness that must be destroyed. Javier knows that his school lives on borrowed time, that eventually his students will face the same persecution they fled. The students at Javier's school are adapted versions of the original X-Men from mainstream Marvel. Jean Grey is Scotia's Summerisle in 1602, a name that cleverly maintains the Scot part of Scott Summers while adapting it to sound period appropriate. Scotius has the same powers as Cyclops. He projects destructive energy beams from his eyes, requiring him to wear a protective visor or eye band at all times to prevent accidentally unleashing his power. The name Summerisle is a reference to the film The Wicker Man, adding another layer of meaning for those familiar with that story of pagan rituals and sacrifice. Javier and his students represent something profound, the idea that those who are different are not monsters, but simply human beings who happen to possess abilities that others lack. This theme has always been central to X-Men stories, serving as an allegory for various forms of prejudice and discrimination. In the context of 1602, when religious orthodoxy demanded conformity and punished deviation, the witchbreed's persecution feels historically grounded while remaining relevant to contemporary issues. The original 5 students each have their powers adapted for the setting. Jean Grey is perhaps the most powerful, possessing both telepathic and telekinetic abilities like Javier himself, though her powers are still developing. In mainstream Marvel, Jean Grey is one of the most important X-Men, eventually becoming host to the Cosmic Phoenix Force. In 1602, her potential is recognized but not yet fully realized. She is compassionate and strong-willed, determined to prove that Witchbreed and humans can coexist peacefully. Robert Trefusis represents Bobby Drake, Iceman, the youngest of the original X-Men in mainstream continuity. Robert's powers allow him to generate and control ice, freezing moisture in the air to create ice slides, projectiles, or defensive barriers. The surname Trefusis is adapted from ice being part of Drake's codename, maintaining a thematic connection while sounding appropriately historical. Robert is portrayed as younger and less mature than the others, still learning to control his considerable power. Henry McCoy, known in mainstream Marvel as Beast, retains his name in 1602 but is called Hal McCoy. His mutation is more physically obvious than the others. He possesses enhanced strength, agility, and unusually large hands and feet. In later mainstream continuity, Beast becomes increasingly bestial in appearance, covered in blue or gray fur. In 1602, that transformation is only beginning, but his physical differences make him obviously mutated, impossible to pass as a normal human. His brilliant intellect is maintained, making him both the school's scholar and one of its most formidable members in combat. The Angel, Warren Worthington III in mainstream Marvel, becomes Werner in 1602, a name that maintains the W alliteration while being appropriate for someone of German or Central European background. Werner possesses large white feathered wings growing from his shoulder blades, allowing him to fly. Of all the students, his mutation is the most visually striking and the most obviously superhuman. In a religious age, some might see him as angelic, blessed by God, while others would view him as demonic. The ambiguity of how his mutation is interpreted reflects how prejudice often involves projection. People see what they want or fear to see, regardless of the reality. The final member of the Abe's original five is John Gray, Jean's cousin, representing Iceman's real-world position as Cyclops' brother. Wait, no, that's not right. Let me correct that. The character representing Jean Grey's love interest is Scotius Summer Isle, who represents Cyclops. The five students are Scotius, Jean, Robert Trefusis, Iceman, Hal McCoy, Beast, and Werner, Angel. The dynamics between them mirror the original X-Men while being adapted to their circumstances. Scotius and Jean are drawn to each other, beginning a relationship that will face trials. The others form a close-knit group, united by their shared experience of persecution and their determination to prove Javier's dream of peaceful coexistence can become reality. But not all Witchbreeds share Javier's dream. The Grand Inquisitor. Enrique represents the darkest possible outcome for someone born different in an age of religious persecution. In mainstream Marvel, Eric Lensher, Magneto, is a Holocaust survivor who witnessed the worst of human cruelty and concluded that humans and mutants could never peacefully coexist. He becomes a revolutionary, sometimes villain, believing that mutants must dominate humans to ensure their survival. In 1602, Enrique's backstory is even more tragic. He was born Jewish in Spain during a period of intense persecution. As a child, he was forcibly converted to Christianity, his identity and heritage stripped away. He discovered his mutant power to control magnetism, to manipulate metal through force of will. This power might have allowed him to escape, to resist his oppressors. Instead, he chose survival through collaboration, joining the very institution that had persecuted him. He became an inquisitor, hunting heretics and Witchbreed, using his power to serve the church that had destroyed his former life. Enrique represents internalized oppression made manifest. He persecutes others like himself, perhaps trying to prove that he's different from them, that he's acceptable where they are not. Or perhaps he's acting out of nihilistic rage. If he cannot be free, then no one will be. His magnetic powers make him extraordinarily dangerous, capable of controlling weapons, restraints, and any metal objects in his environment. When he leads Inquisition forces to attack Javier's school, he knows exactly what he's hunting because he is himself what he hunts. The attack on the school is one of the series' most intense sequences. Enrique arrives with soldiers and witch hunters demanding that Javier surrender the students. Javier refuses, trying to negotiate, to appeal to whatever humanity remains in Enrique. But Enrique is beyond such appeals. The battle that follows demonstrates both the students' powers and their discipline. They fight not to kill, but to defend, trying to disable attackers without causing permanent harm. But they are outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Jean Grey makes the ultimate sacrifice, realizing that the school cannot be saved and that her friends need time to escape. She unleashes the full extent of her telepathic power. She broadcasts a massive mental assault, incapacitating everyone in the area, soldiers, witch hunters, even her fellow students, and Javier himself. The strain is too much. Blood streams from her nose, her eyes, her ears. She pushes beyond her limits, beyond what any telepath should attempt. And when it's over, she collapses, seemingly dead, having given her life so others might live. Jean's death, or apparent death, is a deliberate echo of her sacrifice in mainstream Marvel continuity, particularly the famous Dark Phoenix storyline where she sacrifices herself to save the universe. Here, her sacrifice is more intimate but no less heroic. She dies protecting her friends, her teacher, her dream of a better world. The impact on the surviving students is devastating. They have lost a friend, a sister, and a symbol of hope, but they cannot afford to mourn yet. They must escape, scatter, survive. Javier leads the remaining students away, and the school that represented safety and community is abandoned. The Fantastic Four, Marvel's first superhero team in the Silver Age, are reimagined in 1602 as explorers and natural philosophers rather than modern astronauts. Sir Richard Reed is a brilliant scholar and theorist, obsessed with understanding the natural world through observation and reason. He represents the emerging scientific method, the transition from medieval scholasticism to Enlightenment rationality. Benjamin Grimm is his loyal companion, a skilled sailor and warrior, gruff and practical where Richard is intellectual and theoretical. Susan Storm, the sister of young Jonathan Storm, is a lady of quality who nonetheless has an adventurous spirit and keen intelligence. She and Richard have feelings for each other, though propriety and circumstance complicate their relationship. Jonathan is the youngest, barely more than a boy, impetuous and brave in the way of youth who haven't yet learned true fear. These four embark on a voyage to explore the strange Sargasso Sea, a real location in the Atlantic Ocean known for its calm waters, unusual currents, and legends of ships becoming trapped in dense floating seaweed. In reality, the Sargasso Sea is simply a large area of ocean with different characteristics than surrounding waters. In the Marvel Universe, it's often depicted as a mysterious zone where strange things occur. In 1602, Reed believes it holds secrets that could expand humanity's understanding of the natural world. Their ship ventures into the Sargasso, and they encounter energies unlike anything known to science or magic of the era. These mysterious forces wash over the vessel, saturating everyone aboard. The crew dies, overwhelmed by the transformation, but the four survive, changed fundamentally by the energies. Reed gains the ability to stretch and reshape his body, extending his limbs to impossible lengths, flattening himself, contorting into any form. He can squeeze through impossibly small spaces, reach objects far above or below, and absorb impacts by allowing his elastic body to deform and reform. The power is both useful and disturbing, making him visibly inhuman when he uses it. Benjamin Grimm suffers the worst physical transformation. His body becomes living stone, his skin replaced by orange rock-like material, his strength increased enormously at the cost of his human appearance. He looks monstrous, like a golem from Jewish legend or a creature from classical mythology. The transformation is irreversible. trapping him in a form that makes him powerful, but isolates him from normal human contact. People fear him. Children scream at his approach, and he can never again experience simple human pleasures like feeling the sun on his skin or the touch of another person's hand. Susan Storm gains perhaps the strangest power. She becomes what the people of 1602 call an air elemental, her body transformed into living air, invisible and intangible. She can move through solid objects, cannot be struck by physical weapons, and doesn't need to breathe. But she cannot become solid again, cannot be seen or touched. For a woman in an era that values marriage and family, where identity is tied to physical presence, this transformation is devastating. She can communicate through manipulating air, creating sounds, but she remains forever incorporeal, forever apart. Young Jonathan Storm is literally set aflame. His body generates intense heat and fire, transforming him into a living torch. Unlike the mainstream Human Torch, who can control when he flames on, Jonathan in 1602 burns continuously, unable to extinguish himself. He must remain isolated, kept in a special chamber designed by Reed where he cannot accidentally burn down buildings or harm people. The flames don't consume him, and he doesn't feel pain, but he cannot touch anything, cannot be near anyone. Like his sister, he is trapped in transformation, isolated by the very power that makes him extraordinary. The four from the fantastic are imprisoned by Count Otto von Doom when they seek refuge in Latveria after their transformation. Doom recognizes their value, seeing their powers as subjects for study and potential weapons for his ambitions. He claims to want to help them, to find a cure for their conditions, but his true motives are more selfish and sinister. Reed, retaining his intellect despite his physical transformation, works with Doom's scientific equipment, hoping to find solutions to reverse or control their transformations. But he also observes Doom carefully, noting the Count's experiments with genetics and strange technologies. When other heroes come to rescue them, Reed has gathered crucial intelligence about Doom's plans and resources. The rescue of the Fantastic Four is accomplished through a joint effort by multiple heroes, demonstrating how the disparate characters must work together against common threats. It's a sequence that exemplifies superhero team dynamics, with each hero contributing their unique abilities to overcome obstacles and opposition. The freed four join the larger group of heroes, adding their considerable powers to the fight against the story's villains. Another crucial hero in Marvel 1602 is Donal, the interpretation of Thor Odinson, god of thunder. In mainstream Marvel, Thor is a founding Avenger, the Prince of Asgard who wields the enchanted hammer Mjolnir and commands lightning. In 1602, his divine nature is obscured, presented ambiguously. Donal is a massive blonde-haired man of seemingly German origin, immensely strong and jovial, who carries a hammer and claims to be searching for Templar treasure. The Templars were a real medieval military religious order that was suppressed and destroyed in the 14th century amid accusations of heresy. Legends quickly grew about Templar treasures and secrets they supposedly possessed. In 1602, Donal's quest for this legendary treasure seems like the obsession of a treasure hunter. But there are hints that he is something more. His strength exceeds human limits. His hammer, though it appears to be a simple weapon, seems to respond to his will. When he strikes it against the ground, thunder rumbles and lightning flashes as if nature itself obeys his command. The ambiguity about Donal's nature is deliberate. In an age when the distinction between myth and reality, between divine intervention and natural phenomena, was less clear than in modern times, presenting Thor as potentially either a god or an extraordinary human works perfectly. Characters who encounter him are uncertain what to make of him. Is he touched by God? Is he a demigod from pagan legends? Is he simply an unusually powerful man with access to strange technologies or magics? The story leaves this question open, allowing readers to interpret according to their preference. What remains clear is that Donald is heroic, good-hearted, and immensely powerful. He joins the other heroes willingly, contributing his strength and thunder to their cause. His jovial personality and straightforward approach to problems provide contrast to the more complicated or cynical characters like Fury or Murdoch. He represents the archetypal hero, strong, brave, honorable, uncomplicated by moral ambiguity or hidden agendas. In sequences where the heroes battle together, Donald's presence is transformative. Enemies who seemed overwhelming become manageable when lightning crashes down upon them. Obstacles that appeared insurmountable crumble under blows from his hammer. He embodies the power of myth made manifest, the idea that sometimes a hero is simply someone with the strength and will to stand against evil and protect the innocent. The collected heroes of 1602 represent a remarkable assembly, each bringing different abilities and perspectives. They are not yet a formal team with a name and structure, but they work together out of necessity and shared purpose. They understand that the world faces threats too great for any individual to face alone. The cooperation between them demonstrates the fundamental superhero team dynamic that has always been central to Marvel Comics. Heroes who are individually powerful, but together become something greater. Every hero story requires worthy antagonists, and Marvel 1602 provides several villains whose reimagined versions are as compelling as their mainstream counterparts. The primary antagonist is Count Otto von Doom, ruler of Latveria and one of the most brilliant minds in the world. In mainstream Marvel, Dr. Victor Von Doom is often considered the greatest villain, a man who combines scientific genius with mastery of magic, whose iron will and conviction of his own superiority make him extraordinarily dangerous. In 1602, he is Otto rather than Victor, a change that Gaiman made to avoid confusion with Dr. Octopus, another prominent Marvel villain whose real name is Otto Octavius. Otto von Doom is known as Otto the Handsome, a title that reflects his striking appearance, but also his vanity. Unlike the mainstream Doom, whose face is hideously scarred, leading him to constantly wear a metal mask, 1602's Otto is unblemished and attractive, which makes his wickedness more insidious. Evil does not always announce itself through monstrous appearance. Sometimes it wears a beautiful face. Doom's ambitions in 1602 center on his genetic experiments and his desire to unlock the secrets of the witch breed. He has captured specimens of various creatures and individuals with unusual properties, studying them to understand how their abilities function. His motivations are presented as complex. He claims to pursue knowledge for its own sake, to advance human understanding. But his methods are cruel, treating sentient beings as objects for study, and his ultimate goals clearly involve power and control rather than pure scientific inquiry. When the Fantastic Four come to his realm seeking help, Doom sees opportunity. Here are four individuals transformed by unknown energies, displaying powers unlike anything he has encountered. He welcomes them with false hospitality, imprisons them, and begins his experiments. Reed Richards, despite his own transformation, possesses a scientific mind that Doom values and exploits. Doom allows Reed access to equipment and materials, ostensibly to help find cures, but actually to advance Doom's own research. Doom's Latveria is depicted as a realm of contradictions. It is technologically advanced for the era, with devices and innovations not found elsewhere. But it is also a police state where Doom's word is absolute law and dissent is crushed mercilessly. The common people live in fear, and anyone who displeases the Count simply disappears. When heroes infiltrate Latveria to rescue the Four, they encounter sophisticated defenses, automated weapons, guards equipped with advanced equipment, and Doom himself, who proves to be a formidable combatant despite appearing to be primarily a scholar. The confrontation with Doom demonstrates his dangerousness. He's not simply a physically weak intellectual who relies on minions. He fights directly, using weapons and devices of his own invention. He's a skilled strategist who anticipates his enemy's actions and prepares countermeasures. Even when the heroes succeed in freeing the Four and escaping, Doom survives and continues to pose a threat. He represents the villain who cannot be permanently defeated, only temporarily thwarted, who will always return with new schemes and more dangerous plans. Another primary antagonist is King James II and I himself. In real history, James was a complex figure, an intellectual king who wrote books on theology and witchcraft, who presided over the creation of the King James Bible, but who also was paranoid about conspiracies and harsh in his dealings with those he viewed as threats. In Marvel 1602, these negative aspects are amplified and twisted by the influences of villains who manipulate him for their own ends. The historical James had a fascination with witchcraft, writing a book called Demonology that discussed demons, magic, and the evil of those who practice dark arts. This translated perfectly into the world of 1602, where James views witchbreed as abominations that must be eradicated. He is not simply a politician making calculated decisions. He is a true believer, convinced that witchbreed are agents of Satan seeking to corrupt and destroy godly society. James's paranoia is exploited by his advisors, particularly by Doom, who provides him with intelligence about various threats to his realm. Doom presents himself as a loyal ally, offering Latveria's resources to support England, while actually maneuvering James into positions that serve Doom's interests. James, convinced that he is surrounded by enemies and traitors, becomes increasingly tyrannical. He orders the execution of Doctor Strange, arrests and imprisons Nicholas Fury, and eventually sends forces to destroy Carlos Javier's school. The portrayal of James as an antagonist raises interesting questions about villainy and responsibility. Is James truly evil, or is he a misguided man manipulated by actual villains? His beliefs about witchbreed, while abhorrent, are consistent with the religious worldview of his era. His paranoia, while destructive, is not entirely unfounded in a world where conspiracies and assassination plots were real and constant threats. The text presents him as an antagonist whose actions harm the heroes and innocent witchbreed, but also as a product of his time and circumstances, influenced by villains who steer him toward greater cruelty. Grand Inquisitor Enrique, as discussed earlier, represents another form of villainy, the oppressed who becomes the oppressor. His powers make him one of the most dangerous individuals in the entire story. His control over magnetism allows him to manipulate any metal object, turning weapons against their wielders, ripping armor from soldiers, forming restraints from chains and bars. In the modern Marvel universe, Magneto has lifted submarines from the ocean, manipulated the iron in people's blood, and even affected entire planets' magnetic fields. Enrique's powers, while perhaps not yet developed to such extremes, are still formidable in an era where metal is everywhere, in weapons, armor, tools, and architecture. Enrique's attacks on Javier's school and his pursuit of witchbreed throughout the story mark him as a relentless antagonist. But his villainy is tragic rather than purely malevolent. He is what Xavier could have become if he had chosen hatred over hope, what any mutant might become if persecution ground away every shred of compassion and faith in humanity. His existence poses an uncomfortable question to Javier and his students. If someone like themselves, someone born with powers, can become a monster who persecutes his own kind, what does that say about the nature of prejudice and hate? David Banner appears briefly but significantly in Marvel 1602, representing the Hulk. In mainstream Marvel, Bruce Banner is a scientist who transforms into the monstrous Hulk when angered, a being of near limitless strength and rage. In 1602, David Banner has already been transformed, though the circumstances are left mysterious. He exists as a massive green-skinned monster kept imprisoned by King James, who views him as both a curiosity and a potential weapon. Banner's role in the story is primarily as a victim and a symbol. He cannot speak or reason in his transformed state, only rage and destroy. He is kept chained in darkness, a living demonstration of what happens when witchbreed powers run amok, turning someone into an uncontrollable monster. James displays him to others as justification for his policies against witchbreed. See what they become, see why they must be destroyed before they destroy us. But Banner's transformation is also tragic. Whatever happened to create the Hulk, Banner himself is gone, lost within the monster. When he eventually breaks free and rampages through London, causing massive destruction, the heroes must stop him, knowing that the being they fight was once human. His ultimate fate reflects the ongoing tragedy of the Hulk character, someone whose power makes them dangerous to everyone around them, including themselves, who cannot control what they become. These villains, each in their different ways, embody various aspects of what makes antagonists compelling. Doom represents ambitious intellect willing to do anything for power and knowledge. James represents fearful authority lashing out at what it doesn't understand. Enrique represents the tragedy of internalized hatred. Banner represents power without control, transformation without hope of return. Together, they create a multi-layered threat that requires all the heroes working together to overcome. As the situation in England becomes increasingly dangerous, with King James hunting witchbreed and Doctor Strange executed, the heroes realize they cannot remain. The old world has become a death trap, where their powers mark them for persecution and death. But there is another option. The New World, the Americas, still wild and largely unexplored by Europeans, where perhaps they might find freedom and safety. The decision to voyage to the New World is driven partly by necessity and partly by clues and visions that suggest something important awaits there. Doctor Strange, before his death, provided cryptic guidance about seeking answers in the Americas. Virginia Dare's connection to the Roanoke colony makes the New World personally significant to her. And there are reports of strange weather and phenomena emanating from the region where Roanoke lies, suggesting that whatever is causing the worldwide temporal disturbances might be centered there. Assembling a ship and crew for such a dangerous voyage requires resources and planning. Nicholas Fury, though outlawed by King James, still has connections and hidden resources. Carlos Javier contributes what remains of his wealth after the destruction of his school. The various heroes pool their abilities and knowledge. Reed Richards provides navigation skills and understanding of ocean currents. Benjamin Grimm, despite his stone form, knows ships and sailing. Donald's strength proves useful in moving cargo and making repairs. The voyage itself is perilous, as all ocean travel was in the early 17th century. Storms threaten to capsize the vessel, supplies run low. The strain of being confined on a ship with limited space and resources tests everyone's patience and cooperation. Tensions arise between characters with different backgrounds and priorities. The witchbreed students, unused to hardship, struggle with the conditions. Peter Parquag, the youngest and least experienced, does his best to be useful while feeling overwhelmed by the company of so many extraordinary individuals. But the voyage also provides opportunities for character development and relationship building. Confined together for weeks, the heroes get to know one another. Alliances form and friendships develop. Scotius and Jean's relationship deepens despite the tragedy of her eventual fate. Virginia speaks with various heroes about her life in Roanoke, her transformations, and her uncertainty about what they will find in America. Matthew Murdock entertains the group with music and stories, using his skills to maintain morale. Discussions occur about what they hope to find and what they fear. The temporal disturbances suggest that something is fundamentally wrong with the world. But what? Strange indicated that the answer lay in the new world. But he could not or would not explain clearly what that meant. Some speculate about lost civilizations or ancient artifacts. Others wonder if some new form of witch breed has appeared with reality-altering powers. The mystery grows as they sail westward. Eventually, they sight land, the coastline of what would become North Carolina. As they approach, the weather grows increasingly strange. The sky displays colors that shouldn't exist, pulsing auroras even though they're too far south for northern lights. Lightning strikes constantly, but without thunder. The air feels charged, electric, as if the world itself holds its breath. Whatever is causing the temporal anomalies, they are approaching its epicenter. Landing at Roanoke, they find the colony still inhabited and thriving, which itself is strange given its historical fate. The colonists, seeing Virginia return after her long absence, welcome the newcomers cautiously. But there is tension in the air, a sense that the colonists know something, that they're keeping secrets. And then Rojas appears, the man who has protected Virginia since childhood, the guardian whose presence has shaped her life. Rojas' meeting with the heroes from Europe is tense. He views them with suspicion, uncertain of their intentions. Nicholas Fury, recognizing something familiar in Rojas' bearing and manner, approaches him as an equal, a fellow warrior and leader. They size each other up, two hard men accustomed to command and combat, trying to determine if they can trust each other. Rojas agrees to speak with them, to hear why they've journeyed so far, but he remains guarded. It is Doctor Strange's widow Clea, carrying messages from her late husband, who provides the crucial information. She explains what Strange discovered, that a temporal rift exists nearby, that someone from another time has been displaced, and that this displacement is tearing apart the fabric of reality. The universe cannot sustain this paradox indefinitely. If not corrected, if the displaced person is not returned to their proper time, everything will eventually unravel into chaos and nothingness. The revelation that Rojas himself is the displaced person, that his very presence is destroying the universe, hits everyone like a thunderbolt. Rojas doesn't remember being from the future. His memories of his life before arriving in 1587 are fragmented, dreamlike. He knows he came from somewhere else, that something terrible happened, but the details have faded. Being told that he is the cause of the world's impending doom, that he must leave to save everyone, is devastating. Virginia's reaction is even more intense. The man she loves, the guardian who has always protected her, must be sent away, perhaps forever. And the temporal energies his presence generated transformed her, gave her powers that made her special, but also marked her as different. Everything she is, everything she can do, exists because of the paradox that Rojas represents. If he is sent back to his proper time, will she cease to exist? Will she lose her powers? Will her memories be erased? The ethical dilemma is profound and painful. To save the universe, one man must be sacrificed, sent forward into a future he doesn't remember, away from people he loves and a life he has built. Those who care about him must watch him go, must actively participate in his removal. And there is no guarantee that he will survive the journey through time or that the future he returns to will be better than the past he is leaving. The final confrontation takes place near the temporal rift, the tear in reality that Rojas' arrival created 15 years earlier. The rift is not visible in normal light, but those with mystical senses or enhanced perception can detect it. A wound in the fabric of space-time, pulsing with chronological energies, slowly expanding as it consumes more of reality. The plan is straightforward, but dangerous. Rojas must be brought into direct contact with the rift. The chronological energies will then pull him forward through time, returning him to approximately when he left his original era. This should seal the rift, stabilize the timeline, and save the universe from unraveling. The Watcher Uatu has confirmed this is the only solution, though his non-interference oath prevents him from acting directly. But Rojhaz refuses to go willingly. He argues that there must be another way, that perhaps the rift can be sealed without sending him away. He points to all the good he has done, the lives he has saved, including Virginia and the entire Roanoke colony. How can it be right to destroy all of that? How can the universe demand such a cruel price? The heroes are divided. Some, like Nicholas Fury, accept that hard choices must be made, that personal desires cannot outweigh universal necessity. Others, like Virginia, desperately seek alternatives, unwilling to accept that the man they love must be erased from their lives. Carlos Javier attempts to find a compromise, suggesting that perhaps Rojhaz could be sent forward but then somehow returned after the crisis passes. But Strange's messages were clear. The paradox can only be resolved by removing its cause permanently. As they debate and plan, Count Otto von Doom arrives with forces of his own. He has been tracking the heroes, monitoring their journey, and he too has discerned the truth about the temporal rift. But Doom sees opportunity where others see crisis. If he can study the rift, if he can understand and control the chronological energies, he might gain power over time itself. Such power would make him invincible, able to reshape history according to his will. The battle that erupts is chaotic and desperate. Doom's forces engage the heroes while Doom himself attempts to reach the rift. The Fantastic Four face Doom directly, their powers against his weapons and intellect. Donald summons lightning, striking down Doom's soldiers and shattering their weapons. The Witchbreed students fight with practiced coordination, using their powers defensively while trying to minimize casualties. Virginia transforms repeatedly, shifting from human to white lion to griffin-like creature, using her various forms, strengths as needed. She tears through Doom's forces, driven by desperate determination to protect Rojhaz and prevent anyone from using the rift. Matthew Murdock moves through the battlefield like a ghost, his senses allowing him to anticipate attacks and strike with precision despite his blindness. In the midst of combat, Nicholas Fury makes his move. He has been observing Rojhaz, watching for an opening. Fury understands what must be done and accepts that it falls to him to do it. When Rojhaz is distracted, focused on protecting Virginia from enemies, Fury strikes from behind, a calculated blow that renders Rojhaz unconscious without killing him. It is a betrayal, but also a mercy, sparing Rojhaz the agony of walking knowingly into his own exile. Virginia screams in rage and grief, transforming into her most dangerous form, a white lion of tremendous size and ferocity. She attacks Fury, and he does not defend himself beyond trying to protect Rojhaz's unconscious form. He accepts her fury, knowing he deserves it, knowing that what he has done will haunt him. Only the intervention of other heroes prevents Virginia from killing Fury in her anguish. With Rojhaz unconscious, Fury lifts him and carries him toward the rift. The journey is only a few hundred yards, but it feels infinite. Doom realizes what is happening and attempts to stop Fury, but the combined efforts of the other heroes hold Doom back. Reed stretches his body to entangle Doom's legs. Benjamin Grimm grapples with Doom's armored soldiers. Donald brings lightning down directly onto Doom himself, forcing the Count to focus on survival rather than interference. At the rift's edge, Fury feels the chronological energies pulling at both Rojhaz and himself. To complete the task, to ensure Rojhaz passes through the rift, Fury must carry him all the way, which means Fury himself will be pulled forward in time as well. Fury understands this. He accepts it. He has lived a long life, served his queen and country, and now he will perform one final service, saving the entire universe by sacrificing himself and the man in his arms. Fury steps into the rift with Rojhaz in his arms. For a moment they are visible, frozen in that space between times. Fury's expression is grim but resolute. Rojhaz, still unconscious, is unaware of what is happening. And then they are gone. pulled forward through centuries, vanished into the future. The rift begins to collapse, the wound in reality sealing itself as the paradox is resolved. The strange energies dissipate, the unnatural weather clears, the strain on the universe eases. But the cost is devastating. Virginia collapses in human form, sobbing uncontrollably. She has lost Rojhaz, and in a deeper sense, she has lost part of herself. Her identity was built around being his ward, his student, his beloved. Now he is gone, and she must discover who she is without him. The other heroes stand in shocked silence, processing what just happened. They saved the universe, but the price feels almost too high to bear. Count Otto von Doom, injured and defeated, retreats with his remaining forces. He has failed to seize the temporal rift's power, but he has gained valuable information about time travel and temporal mechanics. In his mind, schemes are already forming about how to use this knowledge in future endeavors. He will return to Latveria, rebuild his forces, and continue his plans. This defeat is merely a setback, not an ending. The immediate aftermath is somber. The colonists of Roanoke, freed from Rojhaz's protection, but also from the temporal instability his presence caused, must decide their own future. The heroes from Europe must determine what to do next. Some wish to return to the old world, to continue fighting against persecution and tyranny. Others, like the Witchbreed students who have no safe home to return to, choose to stay in America, hoping to build new lives in a land not yet consumed by the religious hatred of Europe. Peter Farquhar, having witnessed all these extraordinary events, finds himself near where the rift had been. He doesn't notice the small spider, mutated by lingering temporal energies, crawling on his hand. The spider bites him, injecting venom transformed by the same forces that created the rift. Peter feels a sharp pain and brushes the spider away, thinking nothing of it. But the transformation has begun. His body is changing at a cellular level, rewriting his biology to give him powers he cannot yet imagine. David Banner, freed during the chaos of the battle when Doom's forces broke open the prison wagon transporting him, rampages through the area in his Hulk form. The heroes attempt to calm or contain him, but the Hulk is beyond reasoning. He smashes everything in his path, driven by rage and confusion. Eventually, he leaps away into the wilderness, disappearing into the vast unexplored interior of the continent. His fate remains unknown, but somewhere in the Americas, the Hulk wanders, a being of pure destructive power seeking something he cannot name. For those who remain, the world feels fundamentally changed. The temporal crisis has passed, but its effects linger. Individuals who gained powers because of the rift retain those abilities. The Witchbreed continue to exist and will continue being born in future generations. The universe has been saved, but the alternate timeline that should never have existed persists in a strange state of limbo. And then, Uatu, the Watcher, makes his final intervention. He communicates with the remaining heroes, explaining what he and his fellow Watchers have decided. The universe that was created by Rojhaz's temporal displacement, this entire reality designated Earth 3011, will not be erased. Instead, it will be preserved as a pocket universe, separate from the main Marvel timeline but allowed to continue existing. The people living in it are real, their experiences matter, and destroying an entire universe simply because it was accidentally created seems unnecessarily cruel. This decision provides bittersweet closure. The heroes learn that their world will continue, that their struggles and sacrifices have meaning beyond just preventing universal destruction. They will live on, face new challenges, love and lose, triumph and fail, all within this pocket universe that has become their home. The future remains unwritten, full of possibility and danger. Virginia Dare, standing on the shore, looking out at the ocean that separates her from the life she knew, must find a way forward. She still has her powers, her ability to transform into white-furred creatures, But the man who understood those powers, who protected her when she first manifested them, is gone to a time she cannot reach. She must become her own guardian now, forge her own path, decide who she will be in this world that continues despite all odds. Peter Parquois returns to what passes for civilization in the New World colonies, unaware that he's about to become something extraordinary. The spider's venom works through his system, and strange changes begin. His strength increases dramatically. His reflexes become impossibly fast. He finds he can cling to walls and ceilings, defying gravity itself. A sixth sense develops, warning him of danger before it manifests. He is becoming Spider-Man, though he doesn't know that name yet, doesn't understand what he is transforming into. The other heroes scatter to pursue their various goals and missions. The Fantastic Four seek ways to reverse or control their transformations, hoping that Reed's genius will eventually find solutions. Carlos Javier and his remaining students work to establish a new sanctuary, perhaps in the Americas where religious persecution is less entrenched. Donald continues his mysterious quest, still searching for whatever Templar treasure motivates him. Matthew Murdock returns to his wandering ways, selling his services while secretly working to undermine tyrants and villains. The world of 1602 continues turning, and as it does, new stories begin. The ending of the original series is not truly an ending, but a transition, a moment when one chapter closes and others open. The universe has been saved, but saved for what? For more struggles, more heroism, more villainy, more of everything that makes life meaningful and worth preserving. The success of the original Marvel 1602 series led to several sequels and spin-offs that further explored this alternate timeline. While Neil Gaiman did not write most of these follow-ups, they built on the foundation he established, expanding the world and introducing additional Marvel characters reimagined for the early 17th century setting. The first sequel, 1602, New World, was written by Greg Pak and illustrated by Greg Tocchini. Published in 2005, it focused on the continued adventures in the Americas, particularly following Peter Parquois' transformation into Spider-Man. The story explores how Peter, now exhibiting spider-like abilities, struggles to understand and control his new powers. His journey mirrors the classic Spider-Man origin story, but adapted to the 1602 context. In New World, Peter operates in the colonies, trying to help people while concealing his abilities. The prejudice against Witchbreed means that if his powers become known, he will face persecution. But Peter's sense of responsibility, the same trait that defines him in every timeline, drives him to use his abilities to protect others. He creates a costume to conceal his identity, fashioning it from materials available in the colonies rather than the modern spandex of his mainstream counterpart. The story introduces Norman Osborn in his 1602 incarnation, reimagined as a colonial governor with wealth and political power. In mainstream Marvel, Norman Osborn is the Green Goblin, Spider-Man's arch-nemesis, a businessman who gains superhuman abilities and insanity from an experimental serum. In 1602, his transformation follows similar beats but adapted to the setting. Osborn's experiments with strange substances and his descent into madness create a goblin-like creature, though the visual design is modified for period appropriateness. The conflict between Peter and Osborn plays out against the backdrop of colonial politics and the ongoing tensions between European powers over control of the Americas. Native American tribes also feature more prominently in this sequel, with the story exploring the complicated relationships between colonists and indigenous peoples. David Banner, the Hulk, reappears as well, still wandering the wilderness, occasionally encountering civilization with destructive results. Virginia Dare also returns in New World, having established herself as a protector and leader among the colonists. Her character has matured since Rojhaz's departure, and she has fully embraced her powers and her role. The relationship between Virginia and Peter develops, with the two young people finding common ground in their shared experience of possessing abilities that make them different. Their dynamic adds emotional depth to the action sequences and plot developments. The second major sequel was Marvel 1602, Fantastic Four, written by Peter David and illustrated by Pascal Alix, published in 2006. This 5-issue miniseries focused on the Four as they voyaged to the Far East, specifically to the fictional nation of Wakanda. In mainstream Marvel, Wakanda is an African nation of tremendous technological advancement, protected by the Black Panther. In 1602, Wakanda is reimagined as an advanced civilization that has remained hidden from European colonizers, preserving its culture and developing unique technologies based on the miraculous metal called vibranium. The Fantastic Four travel to Wakanda seeking help for their conditions, hoping the legendary wisdom of Wakandan scholars might provide cures or at least better understanding of their transformations. There they encounter Lord T'Challa, the Black Panther, ruler and protector of Wakanda. T'Challa is presented as noble, intelligent, and fiercely protective of his people and nation. The Wakandans have advanced far beyond European technology in many ways, using vibranium to create wonders that seem like magic. The story explores themes of colonialism and cultural exchange. The Four must navigate Wakandan customs and politics while seeking aid. T'Challa is willing to help, but also wary of allowing outsiders too much access to Wakandan secrets. The interaction between Reed's scientific mind and Wakandan technology, which blends science and what Europeans would consider mysticism, creates interesting philosophical discussions about the nature of knowledge and progress. A villain emerges in the form of an enemy of Wakanda, threatening both the Four and their hosts. The combined efforts of the Fantastic Four and the Black Panther become necessary to defeat this threat. Action sequences showcase the Four's powers working in coordination with T'Challa's combat skills and access to vibranium weapons. By the story's end, the Four have not found cures, but they have gained allies and hope that solutions might eventually be discovered. Spider-Man 1602, written by Jeff Parker and illustrated by Ramon Rosanas, was published in 2009 as a 5-issue miniseries. This sequel delved deeper into Peter Parquois' life as Spider-Man in the colonies. The story is set slightly later than the previous installments, with Peter now more experienced in using his powers and more confident in his heroic identity, though still young and learning. The plot involves a conspiracy among colonial governors and European nobles to exploit the resources of the Americas while oppressing both colonists and Native Americans. Peter uncovers this conspiracy while investigating smaller crimes and injustices. His spider sense and wall-crawling abilities allow him to spy on the conspirators, gathering evidence of their misdeeds. The series also introduced Mary Jane Watson in her 1602 incarnation as a young woman in the colonies who becomes Peter's romantic interest. Their relationship follows familiar patterns from mainstream Spider-Man stories, attraction complicated by Peter's secret identity and the dangers that surround him. Mary Jane is depicted as spirited and intelligent, capable of taking care of herself, but also becoming endangered by her association with Peter and his activities. Norman Osborn returns as a recurring antagonist, his goblin persona now fully developed and dangerous. The psychological battle between Peter and Osborn, each trying to outmaneuver the other while maintaining their public identities, forms a central thread. Osborn's position as a colonial governor gives him legitimate authority, making him a threat both as a supervillain and as a political enemy who could legally destroy Peter's life. The climax involves Peter having to save multiple people simultaneously, a classic Spider-Man dilemma about responsibility and the costs of heroism. He succeeds, but not without personal sacrifices. The story ends with Peter more committed than ever to using his powers for good, despite knowing the dangers and difficulties that choice entails. Another interesting expansion of the 1602 universe came through the Secret Wars event in 2015. During this multiverse-spanning storyline, which involved the destruction and eventual restoration of the Marvel multiverse, various alternate realities were preserved as domains on a patchwork planet called Battleworld. The 1602 universe became one of these domains, featured in the miniseries Witch Hunter Angela. Written by Marguerite Bennett and illustrated by Stephanie Hans and Fraser Irving, Witch Hunter. Angela starred the character Angela, originally from the Spawn universe but incorporated into Marvel as a long-lost sibling of Thor. In the 1602 domain, Angela is reimagined as a witch hunter in service to King James, hunting down witch breed and practitioners of magic. Her companion is the character Sarah, reimagined as an apprentice witch who Angela has secretly spared and trained. The story explores the moral complexity of Angela's position. She serves a regime that persecutes innocent people, but she operates within that system trying to minimize harm, saving those she can while maintaining her cover. The relationship between Angela and Sarah provides emotional depth, showing how even in oppressive societies, human connections and love can flourish. The 1602 domain in Secret Wars also featured cameo appearances by many characters from the original series and its sequels, showing how the universe has continued developing. The Witchbreed School has been re-established in a new location. The Fantastic Four continue their adventures. Peter Parker has become a well-known vigilante, though his identity remains secret. The world feels lived in and ongoing, not frozen in time, but evolving and changing. These sequels and spin-offs, while varying in quality and faithfulness to Gaiman's original vision, demonstrate the richness of the 1602 concept. The basic premise of Marvel characters reimagined in the early 17th century proves flexible enough to support many different stories and genres. Whether focusing on superhero action, political intrigue, romantic drama, or philosophical questions about power and responsibility, the 1602 universe provides a compelling setting. The sequels also allowed for characters who didn't appear in the original series to receive their 1602 versions. Black Panther and Wakanda, though not part of Gaiman's original story, fit naturally into the expanded universe. Other characters like Mary Jane Watson, additional X-Men, and various Marvel villains have been adapted as well, each reimagined to fit the historical context while maintaining their essential characteristics. Creating Marvel 1602 required extensive research and careful planning. Neil Gaiman approached the project with the thoroughness of a historical novelist as well as the creativity of a comic book writer. He read extensively about the period, consulting both primary sources from the era and modern historical analyses. He studied the actual year 1602 specifically, learning what was happening in England, Europe, and the Americas at that precise moment. Gaiman's research extended to visual elements as well. He collected images of Elizabethan and Jacobean clothing, architecture, ships, weapons, and other material culture. These references were shared with artist Andy Kubert to ensure visual accuracy. While the story is fantastical, the grounding in historical detail makes the fantastic elements more believable. When characters wear accurate period clothing and inhabit carefully researched environments, readers are more willing to accept elements like witchbreed powers and temporal rifts. The language of the series also received careful attention. Gaiman didn't attempt to write in perfect Elizabethan English, which would have been difficult for modern readers to parse and would have felt artificial. Instead, he aimed for a slightly elevated formal tone that suggested the period without fully reproducing its linguistic quirks. Characters speak clearly enough for modern readers to understand easily, but with vocabulary, sentence structures, and speech patterns that feel appropriate to 1602. Character names required special consideration. Some mainstream Marvel names translated easily to the period, Nicholas Fury, Stephen Strange, Richard Reed. Others needed modification. Peter Parker became Peter Parquois. Bobby Drake became Robert Trefusis. Angel Warren Worthington became Werner. The goal was maintaining recognizability while achieving verisimilitude. Readers should be able to identify which mainstream character each 1602 version represents, but the names should also sound like they belong in 17th century Europe or America. Powers and abilities also required careful adaptation. In the modern Marvel universe, many characters' powers come from radiation, genetic engineering, or futuristic technology. None of these make sense in 1602. Instead, Gaiman reimagined origins to fit the period. The Fantastic Four encounter mysterious energies in the Sargasso Sea rather than cosmic rays in space. Mutant powers are presented as manifestations of witchcraft or demonic influence, rather than genetic mutations. Doctor Strange practices alchemy and mysticism rather than neurosurgery and sorcery. Some characters couldn't easily be adapted to 1602, and Gaiman chose to exclude them rather than force awkward fits. Characters whose origins are intrinsically tied to modern or future technology, like Iron Man or the Punisher, don't appear. Characters created after the 1960s Silver Age are generally absent, keeping the focus on Marvel's foundational heroes and villains. These limitations actually strengthened the story by maintaining focus and coherence rather than trying to include everyone. The collaboration between Gaiman and the art team was crucial to the series' success. Andy Kubert's dynamic pencil work brought energy and emotion to every panel. His character designs balanced historical accuracy with visual appeal, creating costumes and appearances that felt both period-appropriate and iconic. His action sequences, always a strength, worked beautifully in the context of sword fights, ship battles, and magical confrontations rather than modern superhero punch-ups. Richard Izanov's digital painting elevated Kubert's pencils tremendously. His color choices established mood and atmosphere throughout. The limited palette of dark tones and warm firelight made the world feel genuinely historical. When brighter, more saturated colors appeared, such as the unnatural auroras in the sky or the energies of the temporal rift, they stood out dramatically against the generally muted backgrounds. The contrast emphasized that these supernatural elements are intrusions into the natural order. Scott McCowan's scratchboard covers are masterpieces that deserve special recognition. Each cover is a complete work of art that could stand alone outside the context of the comic. McCowan's technique, scraping white lines from black ink to create images that resemble copperplate engravings, perfectly captured the aesthetic of early modern European art. The covers looked like they could have been created in 1602 itself, as if the comic were a historical document rather than a modern creation. The attention to detail extended to lettering and design elements as well. Todd Klein's lettering work used appropriate fonts and styles, avoiding anything that felt too modern or anachronistic. The design of chapter headings, captions, and sound effects all contributed to the overall aesthetic. Even small touches, like the design of Uatu the Watcher's narration boxes, received careful consideration. This thoroughness in every aspect of production created a unified vision. Marvel 1602 doesn't just tell you it's set in the past through dialogue and plot. Every element, from the writing to the art to the lettering to the cover design, reinforces the historical setting. This immersive approach is part of why the series succeeded so completely. Readers weren't just reading about 1602, they were experiencing it. Beneath its surface as an entertaining alternate history superhero story, Marvel 1602 explores several significant themes. The most obvious is the nature of heroism itself. By removing the familiar trappings of modern superhero stories, technology, costumes, secret identities in the modern sense, and placing characters in a radically different historical context, the series asks what makes someone a hero. The answer it suggests is that heroism is not about powers or costumes or technology. It's about choices, about character, about standing up for what's right even when it's dangerous or costly. Nicholas Fury is heroic not because he has superpowers, which he doesn't, but because he dedicates his life to protecting others and is willing to sacrifice everything, including his own existence, to save the universe. Virginia Dare is heroic not just because she can transform into powerful animals, but because she chooses to use that ability to protect people rather than for personal gain. Peter Parquag becomes heroic when he accepts responsibility for his powers and chooses to use them to help others despite the personal risks. The series also explores persecution and prejudice through the Witchbreed plotline. Carlos Javier's school and the persecution of those with powers serves as an allegory for any form of discrimination based on difference. The Witchbreed are hunted and killed not because they've done anything wrong, but simply because they exist, because their powers make them visibly different from the norm. This mirrors the X-Men's long-standing role as metaphors for marginalized groups facing prejudice. But Marvel 1602 adds historical specificity to this allegory by setting it during an actual period of intense religious persecution. The Spanish Inquisition was real, and it really did torture and execute people for heresy. Accusations of witchcraft really did lead to trials and burnings. By placing the Witchbreed in this historical context, the story connects fictional persecution to actual historical atrocities, giving the allegory more weight and resonance. The character of Enrique, the Grand Inquisitor who is himself a Witchbreed, adds complexity to this theme. He represents the phenomenon of internalized oppression, where members of persecuted groups sometimes participate in their own persecution, either from survival instinct or from having absorbed the prejudices directed against them. Enrique is tragic because he could have been like Javier, working to protect his fellow Witchbreed. Instead, he became their persecutor, using his powers to hunt those like himself. Another major theme is the tension between destiny and free will. The heroes of 1602 exist because of a temporal anomaly. They appeared centuries before they should have according to the natural timeline. Yet despite this artificial origin, they make real choices, form genuine relationships, and live authentic lives. When they learn that correcting the temporal anomaly might erase them from existence, they must decide whether their individual lives matter more than the survival of the universe. The Resolution, where Uatu and his fellow Watchers preserve the 1602 universe as a pocket reality, suggests that all lives have value, even those that arise from paradoxes or accidents. The people of Earth 311 are just as real as those of Earth 616, the main Marvel universe. Their choices matter, their sacrifices mean something. The story rejects the idea that some lives are more legitimate than others based on how they came to be. Time and history itself are themes throughout the series. The story plays with the question of whether history has an inevitable course or if small changes can create vastly different outcomes. Rojas' arrival in 1587 created a cascade of changes that transformed the world. The Roanoke colony survived instead of vanishing. Witchbreed appeared centuries early. European politics shifted in response to the presence of superhumans. One displaced person from the future changed everything. Yet despite all these changes, many core elements remained the same. People still struggled for power and control. Prejudice and persecution still occurred, just directed at Witchbreed instead of only religious minorities. Heroes and villains still arose, driven by the same fundamental character traits that define them in any timeline. This suggests that while specific events might change, human nature and certain patterns of behavior remain constant across time. The theme of sacrifice runs throughout the story, culminating in multiple characters giving up everything to save others. Doctor Strange is executed, but continues helping from beyond death. Jean Grey sacrifices her life to save her fellow students and teacher. Nicholas Fury gives up his entire life and world to ensure Rojhaz is returned to the future. Rojhaz himself, though unconscious for the actual moment, is sacrificed by others who decide his individual desires matter less than universal survival. These sacrifices raise ethical questions without providing easy answers. Was Fury right to knock Rojhaz unconscious and force him through the temporal rift? Did anyone have the right to make that choice for him? Could the ends, saving the universe, justify the means, essentially kidnapping and exiling someone against their will? The story presents these actions as necessary, but doesn't pretend they're uncomplicated or entirely morally pure. Finally, Marvel 1602 explores the relationship between the past and present. By reimagining modern characters in a historical setting, it highlights both continuity and change. We recognize these characters despite their different circumstances, suggesting that something essential about them transcends time period. Yet we also see how profoundly context shapes their manifestations. Peter Parker's essential character, intelligent, responsible, driven to help others, remains constant. But whether he becomes a modern superhero swinging through New York or a colonial-era vigilante protecting American settlements makes an enormous difference in how that character is expressed. This interplay between essence and context reflects broader questions about identity and history. What parts of who we are come from our fundamental nature, and what parts come from our circumstances? If we were born in a different time or place, would we still be recognizably ourselves? Marvel 1602 suggests that core characteristics persist across contexts, but also that we are inevitably shaped by when and where we live. Marvel 1602 was both a commercial and critical success upon its release. The series sold exceptionally well, with issue 1 selling out and requiring multiple printings. The combination of Neil Gaiman's name recognition, the appealing high concept, and strong word of mouth drew both regular Marvel readers and those who might not normally read superhero comics. The series was collected in hardcover and softcover editions that continued selling for years after the initial publication. Critics praised the series highly. Reviews noted Gaiman's skillful adaptation of familiar characters, the rich historical detail, and the compelling mystery at the story's heart. The art team received widespread acclaim, with particular attention paid to Scott McCowan's covers and Richard Izanov's digital painting. Many reviewers identified Marvel 1602 as one of the best alternate reality Marvel stories, standing alongside classics like The Age of Apocalypse and Days of Future Past storylines. The series won and was nominated for multiple awards. It received an Eisner Award nomination for Best Finite Series in 2004, competing against other high-profile works. While it didn't win that particular Eisner, its nomination alone placed it among the year's most acclaimed comics. The series also won a Quill Award for graphic novel in 2005, demonstrating its appeal beyond the traditional comic book audience to mainstream literary readers. Marvel 1602's influence extended beyond its immediate success. It helped establish alternate timeline stories as a viable approach for exploring Marvel characters in different contexts. While what-if stories had been doing something similar since 1977, 1602 demonstrated that an alternate timeline could sustain not just a single issue, but an extended narrative with depth and complexity. This encouraged Marvel to develop other timeline variant stories and eventually contributed to the conceptual framework for projects like the multiverse-spanning Secret Wars event. The success of 1602 also demonstrated Neil Gaiman's continued commercial and creative viability in mainstream comics after years focusing on other projects. Following his legendary run on Sandman, which ended in 1996, Gaiman had worked primarily in prose fiction with occasional returns to comics. Marvel 1602 showed that his return to superhero comics could generate tremendous excitement and sales, paving the way for his later Marvel work, including his 2007 run on Eternals. The series influenced how other creators approached alternate reality stories. The level of detail in reimagining characters, the careful historical research, and the integration of real history with Marvel fictional elements set a high standard. Later alternate timeline projects, whether set in other historical periods, future eras, or completely different settings, often showed the influence of 1602's approach, thorough adaptation rather than simple transposition, maintaining character essence while completely reimagining contexts and origins. Marvel 1602 also contributed to increasing acceptance of historical fantasy and alternate history in superhero comics. While such stories had existed before, 1602's success demonstrated their commercial viability and critical potential. This helped create space for other historical superhero stories, from miniseries to ongoing titles, expanding the range of narrative possibilities available to creators. The series has remained in print continuously since its original publication, unusual for comic series more than 20 years old. New readers continue discovering it, attracted by Gaiman's reputation, interest in alternate histories, or curiosity about seeing familiar characters in unfamiliar contexts. The trade paperback collections remain consistent sellers in bookstores and comic shops, introducing the 1602 universe to successive generations of readers. In 2023, Marvel's What If? Animated series adapted Marvel 1602 for one of its episodes in the show's second season. The episode, titled What If? Captain Carter Fought the Hydra Stomper, actually featured the 1602 universe as a key element, with characters like Captain Carter being displaced through time into the 1602 world, similar to how Captain America was in the comics. This brought the 1602 universe to a much wider audience than the original comics reached, exposing millions of Marvel Cinematic Universe fans to Gaiman's alternate timeline. The What If? Adaptation naturally made changes from the comics, simplifying some elements and modifying others to fit the animated format and the show's focus on Captain Carter rather than Nick Fury. But the core concept remained intact. Marvel heroes in the early 17th century, facing threats appropriate to that era while dealing with a temporal crisis. The episode's production design, showing Elizabethan London and colonial America rendered in animation, introduced new visual interpretations of the 1602 aesthetic. The enduring popularity of Marvel 1602 has led to periodic discussions about further adaptations. Could it be adapted as a live-action film or streaming series? Could it become an animated feature? The challenges are significant: the large ensemble cast, the period setting requiring extensive costume and set design, the complex plot spanning multiple locations. But the success of other period superhero stories and the continued strength of Marvel's film and television division makes such an adaptation not impossible. Academic interest in Marvel 1602 has also developed over the years. Scholars of comic studies, popular culture, and historical fiction have analyzed the series in various contexts. Papers and book chapters have examined how 1602 handles historical representation, how it adapts superhero conventions to different time periods, and what its approach to alternate history suggests about contemporary attitudes toward the past. The series is now occasionally taught in university courses on comics, graphic novels, or popular culture. The fact that Marvel 1602 continues generating interest and analysis more than 20 years after its original publication speaks to its enduring quality and significance. It is not simply a curiosity or a gimmick that worked once and was forgotten. It is a genuinely compelling story, well-crafted and thoughtful, that rewards rereading and continues finding new audiences. One of the most impressive achievements of Marvel 1602 is how successfully it adapts familiar characters to a radically different setting while maintaining what makes each character recognizable and compelling. This required careful analysis of what defines each character essentially versus what is merely contextual detail that can be changed. Take Spider-Man as an example. In his mainstream incarnation, Peter Parker is defined by several key elements. He's young, intelligent, initially inexperienced with his powers, driven by a sense of responsibility after failing to prevent a tragedy, struggles with balancing heroism and normal life, and uses his spider powers in creative ways. His specific origin story, being bitten by a radioactive spider at a science exhibition, is less fundamental than these character traits. In 1602, Peter Parker maintains all those essential characteristics. He's young, intelligent, learning as he goes, deeply responsible, and struggles with the complications his powers create. The specific mechanism of gaining powers changes. Being bitten by a spider mutated by temporal energies rather than radiation. But this doesn't fundamentally alter who he is. He becomes Spider-Man in the 1602 universe because those core traits that define Peter Parker persist regardless of when he lives. Similarly, Doctor Strange is essentially a learned man who bridges science and magic, serving others while grappling with dangers from beyond normal reality. Whether he's a neurosurgeon in modern New York or a physician and alchemist in Elizabethan London, those fundamental aspects remain. His specific circumstances change dramatically, but Stephen Strange is recognizably himself. The X-Men present interesting adaptation challenges because so much of their appeal comes from their specific origins and team dynamics. Yet, 1602 successfully captures their essence by recognizing what truly matters about them. The X-Men are people born different, facing persecution for that difference, trying to prove that peaceful coexistence with the majority is possible despite fear and hatred. Whether they're teenage mutants in 1960s Westchester or witchbreed students in Elizabethan England, these core elements define them. Carlos Javier maintains Xavier's essential characteristics: wise, compassionate, powerful psychic abilities, dedicated to his dream of peaceful coexistence, running a school for those like him. The name change from Charles to Carlos, the shift in time period, the different historical context for the persecution he fights against, none of these alter what makes Xavier recognizable. He is the same person in all the ways that truly matter. The villains receive equally careful treatment. Victor Von Doom becomes Otto Von Doom, ruler of Latveria with brilliant intellect and dangerous ambitions. The specifics change. He doesn't wear his signature metal mask in 1602. His methods involve early modern science and genetics rather than futuristic technology. And his schemes fit the political landscape of early 17th century Europe. But his fundamental nature, brilliant, egotistical, ruthless, convinced of his own superiority, remains constant. Otto is Doom, regardless of time period or specific circumstances. This approach to adaptation demonstrates sophisticated understanding of character construction. Gaiman recognized that superficial details, costume designs, specific powers, visual manifestations, the technological or scientific explanations for abilities can all change without affecting a character's core identity. What matters is personality, motivations, relationships, and the essential conflicts that drive their stories. The success of these adaptations validates a particular approach to alternate universe storytelling. Rather than simply taking modern characters and dropping them unchanged into a different time period, which creates jarring anachronisms and breaks immersion, or changing so much that characters become unrecognizable, 1602 finds the balance. It asks, how would this character manifest in this different context, rather than, how do I force this modern character into the past? This methodology could be applied to other alternate timeline projects. Imagine Marvel characters in ancient Rome, or the Wild West, or Victorian England, or feudal Japan. The key would be identifying each character's essential traits, then reimagining their origins, circumstances, and specific manifestations to fit the new setting while preserving what makes them themselves. Marvel 1602 provides a template for how to do this successfully. The approach also respects readers' intelligence and engagement. By maintaining essence while changing everything else, the series invites readers to think about what truly defines these characters. It becomes an exercise in analysis and appreciation, recognizing why 1602's Peter Parker is clearly the same person as mainstream Peter Parker, despite completely different circumstances, requires understanding what makes Peter Parker who he is, beyond his specific origin story or costume design. The preservation of Earth 3-1 as a pocket universe within Marvel's larger multiverse means that the world of 1602 continues existing, developing, and changing even when not the focus of published stories. While we only see this universe when Marvel publishes comics set there, the implication is that time continues passing, characters continue living and aging, history continues unfolding. This raises fascinating questions about how the 1602 timeline develops. The original series and its immediate sequels are set in 1602 and shortly thereafter. But what happens as the years pass? Does Earth 3-1 experience the same historical events as our reality? The English Civil War in the 1640s, the scientific revolution of the 17th and 18th centuries, the American Revolution, the Industrial Revolution? Or does the presence of superhumans and magic cause history to diverge even more radically from our timeline? The existence of individuals with powers would inevitably affect political and social developments. Which breed mutants continue being born as generations pass? Would they remain persecuted indefinitely, or would gradual acceptance occur? Would witch-breed rights movements develop centuries before civil rights became a major concern in our timeline? Would nations rise or fall based on whether they welcomed or persecuted those with powers? Technological development might follow different paths as well. Reed Richards' genius applied to early modern science and technology could accelerate certain innovations. The study of witch-breed genetics might lead to earlier understanding of heredity and biology. The integration of magic and science, exemplified by Dr. Strange's work before his death, could create entirely new fields of study unknown in our reality. Alternatively, the constant conflicts between heroes and villains might disrupt progress, creating a more chaotic and less stable world where long-term scientific and technological advancement is difficult. The Americas in Earth 3-1 would likely develop very differently from our timeline, with superhumans present from the early colonial period, with Virginia Dare surviving and becoming a powerful protector, with Spider-Man active in the colonies. The balance of power between European colonizers and Native Americans would shift. Would colonization proceed as it did in our reality, or would indigenous peoples, perhaps aided by sympathetic heroes, resist more successfully? Peter Parker's development into Spider-Man and his continued adventures would shape colonial America profoundly. In mainstream Marvel, Spider-Man is a street-level hero focused on New York City. In 1602, he operates in a context where governments are weaker, law enforcement is less organized, and vast wilderness lies beyond small settlements. His heroism might take different forms, protecting communities from threats, mediating conflicts between groups, exploring unknown territories. He could become a legendary figure, stories of the spider passed down through generations. The Fantastic Four's quest for cures or control over their transformations might eventually succeed. If Reed's genius and decades of work eventually solve their problems, how would they choose to live? Would they remain heroes, or would they retire to private life? Would Susan Storm, if able to become solid again, rejoin society after years of incorporeal existence? Would Benjamin Grimm, if restored to human form, consider it a blessing or miss the strength his stone body provided? Carlos Javier's school and the Witchbreed students would face ongoing challenges and opportunities. As students graduate and new ones arrive, the school becomes an institution, a symbol of the possibility of peaceful coexistence. but it also remains a target for those who fear and hate Witchbreed. Over generations, would attitudes shift? Would Witchbreed eventually gain acceptance, or would persecution continue in different forms? The villains of 1602 and their successors would continue posing threats. Count Otto von Doom, if he survived the original series events, would certainly continue his schemes. He might gain even more power over time, expanding Latveria's influence, developing more dangerous technologies and weapons. Or he might face new heroes who rise to oppose him, creating ongoing conflicts that shape European politics for generations. New villains would inevitably emerge. In mainstream Marvel, each generation produces new threats as individuals gain powers and choose to use them selfishly or destructively. The same would occur in Earth 311. Some might be reimagined versions of mainstream Marvel villains whose stories hadn't yet been told in 1602 context. Others might be entirely original to this timeline, products of its unique history and circumstances. The passage of time would eventually bring Earth 311 into its equivalent of the modern era, the late 20th and early 21st centuries. What would that look like? Would the world resemble our reality, having converged back toward similar endpoints despite different paths? Or would it be radically different, shaped by centuries of divergent history? This question offers rich potential for future stories, though Marvel has not yet explored it in published works. The multiverse concept in Marvel Comics means that Earth 311 exists alongside infinite other alternate realities, each with its own history and variations. Sometimes these universes interact, characters cross between them, events in one affect others. Could heroes from Earth 311 visit Earth 616, the mainstream Marvel universe? Could they meet their mainstream counterparts, compare their different lives? Such crossovers would raise fascinating questions about identity, destiny, and the relationship between different versions of the same person. The preservation of Earth 301 also means that the sacrifices made to save it have lasting meaning. Nicholas Fury gave up everything to seal the temporal rift, believing his world would end when the timeline was corrected. But instead, his world continues, saved not just from immediate destruction, but allowed to persist indefinitely. His sacrifice enabled not just survival, but an entire future history that will unfold over centuries. That makes his choice even more heroic. He saved not just the people alive in 1602, but all their descendants, all the generations yet to come. Jean Grey's sacrifice, giving her life to save her fellow students and teacher, similarly, has enduring impact. The students she saved went on to live full lives, to perhaps teach new generations of Witchbreed, to work toward the dream of peaceful coexistence. Her death, while tragic, purchased time and opportunity for others to continue the struggle she believed in. In that sense, she lives on through everyone her sacrifice saved and everything they accomplish. The continuing existence of Earth 301 validates all these sacrifices and struggles. When characters fight to protect their world, to save the people they love, to make things better despite overwhelming odds, the fact that their world persists means their efforts matter. They didn't struggle in vain. Their heroism had real and lasting consequences. The Pocket Universe becomes a testament to the value of heroic action, even in the face of cosmic-scale threats. While Marvel 1602 exists as a pocket universe separate from the main Marvel continuity designated Earth 616, it nonetheless connects to the larger Marvel multiverse in meaningful ways. These connections enhance both the 1602 stories and mainstream Marvel, creating resonances and references that reward attentive readers. The most direct connection is Captain America, Rajhaz himself. He came from a future version of Earth 311, displaced backward in time by the Purple Man's forces. This implies that Earth 311, if left to develop naturally, would eventually reach its own modern era and produce its own heroes, including its own Steve Rogers. The version of Captain America who appeared in 1602 was protecting his future timeline's America against a tyrannical government, maintaining his core characterization even in a dystopian future. When Rojas is sent forward through time at the story's climax, he and Nicholas Fury are pulled into the future of Earth 311. The story doesn't show us what happens to them after they arrive, leaving their ultimate fate mysterious. Do they emerge in the dystopian future Rojas fled, or has their journey through time changed something? Does their arrival in that future affect history, or do they arrive too late to change the precedent for life's rise to power? These questions remain tantalizingly unanswered. Uatu the Watcher provides another connection to mainstream continuity. The Watchers are a race of ancient, immensely powerful beings who observe the universe, but are sworn not to interfere. Uatu specifically watches Earth, observing humanity's development across time and alternate realities. He appears throughout Marvel Comics, often in what-if stories that explore alternate timelines. His presence in Marvel 1602 confirms that this timeline is part of the larger multiverse he observes. Uatu's decision to preserve Earth 311 as a pocket universe after the temporal crisis is resolved represents a rare violation of his non-interference oath. Watchers are not supposed to act, only observe. But Uatu felt responsible for the crisis. The temporal rift that Rojas' displacement created threatened not just Earth 311, but all reality, potentially destroying countless universes. While Uatu didn't cause the rift, his failure to warn anyone or take preventive action might have contributed to the crisis reaching such dangerous proportions. By convincing his fellow Watchers to preserve Earth 311 rather than allowing it to be erased when the timeline was corrected, Uatu ensured that an entire universe of beings would continue existing. This decision reflects an ongoing tension in Uatu's character throughout Marvel Comics. He wants to help, he cares about the beings he observes, but his oath prevents direct intervention. In the case of Earth 311, he found a way to help that technically didn't violate his oath, since the preservation occurred after the immediate crisis was resolved and didn't alter events, only their aftermath. The Secret Wars event that incorporated Earth 311 as a domain on Battleworld created direct interactions between 1602 characters and mainstream Marvel heroes. During Secret Wars, the multiverse was destroyed and then recreated, with various alternate realities preserved as isolated domains ruled by different individuals. The 1602 domain maintained its historical setting and characters, but existed alongside domains representing other alternate timelines and realities. Characters from different domains could sometimes cross boundaries, leading to encounters between Earth 311 versions of characters and their Earth 616 counterparts. These meetings raised interesting questions. How would mainstream Peter Parker react to meeting Peter Parquag? What would Captain America think encountering the 1602 world he inadvertently created? While Secret Wars didn't explore all these possibilities, it demonstrated that Earth 311 could interact with mainstream continuity in meaningful ways. The multiverse structure also allows for the possibility that other Marvel heroes and villains could visit Earth 311 or vice versa. Characters with dimensional travel abilities, like Doctor Strange or Reed Richards in their mainstream versions, could theoretically visit the 1602 universe. Time travelers might accidentally or intentionally journey to Earth 311's past. These potential crossovers offer narrative opportunities that Marvel could explore in future publications. The preservation of Earth 311 as part of the multiverse also means that any multiverse-spanning threat potentially affects it. When reality-warping villains or cosmic entities threaten all existence across all universes, Earth 311 is at risk along with every other timeline. This creates potential for 1602 characters to appear in larger crossover events, contributing their unique perspectives and abilities to universal conflicts. The concept of fixed points in time, moments that must occur in all timelines or that cannot be changed without catastrophic consequences, could apply to Earth 311. Perhaps certain events in 1602 history are fixed points, destined to occur regardless of attempts to prevent them. Or perhaps the temporal rift and its resolution represented a fixed point, something that had to happen to preserve the larger multiverse. These metaphysical questions about destiny and free will connect Earth 311 to broader themes explored throughout Marvel continuity. The existence of Earth 311 also contributes to Marvel's exploration of the multiverse concept itself. Every choice, every possibility, every variation creates a new universe, a new timeline branching off from others. The 1602 universe demonstrates how radically different a world can be while still being recognizably part of the Marvel multiverse. It shows that the essential nature of these characters and conflicts transcends specific circumstances, manifesting across wildly different contexts. Marvel 1602's success and longevity raise questions about why alternate history stories hold such appeal, particularly in superhero comics. What makes readers excited to see familiar characters in unfamiliar contexts? Why do we enjoy seeing how heroes and villains might manifest in different time periods? Part of the appeal is novelty and freshness. After decades of mainstream continuity, seeing familiar characters from new angles provides fresh perspectives. Readers who have followed Spider-Man for years might feel they know everything about him. But Spider-Man in the 17th century is new territory, offering surprises and discoveries even for longtime fans. The alternate history format allows writers to tell stories that would be impossible in mainstream continuity while maintaining connection to the characters readers love. Alternate histories also offer escapism in a specific way. They allow readers to imagine what-if scenarios, exploring how different circumstances might change outcomes. This is fundamentally optimistic. It suggests that our choices matter, that circumstances can be changed, that history is not predetermined. Marvel 1602 shows that heroism can manifest in any era, that the struggle between good and evil, between selfishness and selflessness, transcends time periods. This is reassuring and inspiring. The historical setting specifically appeals to readers interested in history and period fiction. Superhero stories set in modern times don't require much historical knowledge or imagination to visualize. But superhero stories set in 1602 reward readers who know the period, who can appreciate the historical details and references, who notice when real historical events are incorporated or altered. This adds intellectual engagement to the emotional and visceral appeal of superhero action. For readers less familiar with history, alternate histories like 1602 can spark interest in learning about the actual past. Someone who enjoys the 1602 universe might become curious about the real Elizabethan era, about the Spanish Inquisition, about the Roanoke colony. Comics serving as gateway to broader historical learning demonstrates their educational potential, alongside their entertainment value. Alternate histories also allow exploration of themes and issues that might be difficult in contemporary settings. Persecution of the witch-breed in 1602 functions as an allegory for discrimination in ways that feel less preachy or heavy-handed than direct contemporary analogs. By displacing these issues to a historical setting, the story invites readers to think about prejudice and persecution in more abstract analytical ways, while still engaging emotionally with characters suffering under unjust systems. The fish out of water aspect when characters from different times interact adds appeal as well. When Rojas, a 21st century man, navigates 17th century colonial America, his perspective differs from those around him. He knows things they don't, has experienced technologies and social structures they cannot imagine, but he also lacks knowledge they take for granted, cultural reference points, and skills necessary for daily life in their time. This creates both drama and humor, enriching the story. The format also allows writers to critique or comment on modern superhero conventions by showing how they function differently in alternate contexts. The very concept of a superhero as distinct from other heroic figures, knights, saints, legendary warriors, is modern. By placing superheroes in the past, Marvel 1602 highlights what is time-specific about the superhero genre versus what is timeless about heroic narratives. This meta-textual layer adds depth for readers interested in genre analysis. Visually, historical settings offer opportunities distinct from modern superhero stories. Costume designs, architecture, technology all differ from contemporary settings, allowing artists to showcase different skills and styles. The darkness and candlelight of pre-electric eras create different color palettes and lighting effects. Sailing ships, castles, forests, wilderness, these environments look and feel different from modern cities, providing visual variety and richness. The success of Marvel 1602 influenced how Marvel and other publishers approached alternate reality stories. It demonstrated that readers would embrace radical reimagining of characters if done thoughtfully and with respect for what makes the characters essential. This encouraged more ambitious alternate universe projects, from different historical periods to completely fantastical settings, expanding the range of stories that superhero comics could tell. The appeal of alternate histories extends beyond comics to other media. Historical superhero films and shows, from Captain America, the first Avengers World War II setting to Agent Carter's post-war period to various period pieces featuring other characters, demonstrate broad audience interest in seeing superheroes in different historical contexts. Marvel 1602's success anticipated this trend, showing that historical superhero stories could succeed commercially and critically. More than 20 years after its initial publication, Marvel 1602 remains a significant work in comic book history. Its influence can be seen in how Marvel and other publishers approach alternate universe stories, in its continued availability and readership, and in how it expanded possibilities for superhero storytelling. The series proved that major comics events didn't have to be set in mainstream continuity to generate significant interest in sales. While most Marvel events affect Earth 616 directly, 1602 showed that a self-contained alternate universe story could be just as commercially successful and critically acclaimed. This helped pave the way for more experimental standalone projects that didn't need to fit into ongoing continuity. Neil Gaiman's involvement lent legitimacy to superhero comics for audiences who might otherwise dismiss the genre. Gaiman's reputation from Sandman and his prose fiction brought attention from readers who don't typically follow mainstream Marvel titles. This crossover appeal is part of why 1602 succeeded commercially. It reached beyond the standard superhero audience to people interested in historical fiction, alternate history, or Neil Gaiman specifically. The series demonstrated how thoroughly research and attention to period detail could enhance even fantastical stories. The effort put into historical accuracy, period-appropriate language and names, and authentic visual design showed that comics creators take their work seriously, that they're willing to put in the effort to get things right. This attention to craft elevated the entire production, making it feel substantial and worthwhile rather than gimmicky or thrown together. Marvel 1602 also showed that superhero stories could explore complex themes and ideas without sacrificing entertainment value. The temporal paradox plot involves philosophical questions about identity, existence, and sacrifice. The persecution of Witchbreed raises issues of prejudice and discrimination. The historical setting invites reflection on how societies change or remain the same. But none of this feels like homework or propaganda. It's all woven seamlessly into an exciting adventure story with compelling characters. The art of Marvel 1602, particularly Scott McCowan's scratchboard covers, expanded perceptions of what comic book art could be. The covers are gallery-worthy works that could be displayed as standalone art pieces. This artistic ambition, the sense that every element of production receives careful attention and craft, helped elevate the entire medium's reputation. Comics could be not just fun entertainment, but genuine art, worth preserving and studying. The success of the sequels and spin-offs, while varying in quality, proved that the 1602 universe had depth and potential beyond the original story. Multiple creators have contributed to Earth 301's ongoing development, each bringing their own perspectives and interests. This collective world-building enriched the universe, showing that it could sustain multiple stories and different approaches while maintaining coherence and appeal. The adaptation into the What If animated series brought Marvel 1602 to an audience numbering in the millions, far beyond what the original comics reached. This introduced the concepts and characters to people who might never read comic books, expanding the property's cultural footprint. It also validated the original story's quality. Marvel Studios adapted it because they recognized its strong narrative and appealing premise, its suitability for visual adaptation. The continued academic interest in Marvel 1602, with scholarly papers and university courses analyzing it, demonstrates its intellectual substance and cultural significance. Comic studies as a field has established itself in recent decades, and Marvel 1602 is recognized as a work worthy of serious analysis. This academic attention helps preserve the series' reputation and ensures future generations will continue discovering it. For readers who encountered Marvel 1602 when it was first published, it remains a fondly remembered highlight of early 2000s comics. For newer readers discovering it now, it offers a complete, satisfying story that doesn't require extensive knowledge of Marvel continuity to appreciate. This dual appeal, meaningful to longtime fans while accessible to newcomers, is part of why the series has remained relevant decades after publication. Marvel deemed 1602 stands as an example of what superhero comics can achieve when creators are given freedom to experiment, when commercial properties are trusted to skilled writers and artists who respect the source material while bringing their own visions to it. The series demonstrates that alternate universe stories aren't just novelties or cash grabs, but legitimate forms of storytelling that can explore characters and themes in ways mainstream continuity cannot. The world of 1602, with its witchbreed and heroes, its political intrigue and cosmic stakes, its careful historical detail and wild imagination, represents superhero comics at their best. It honors the past, both Marvel's creative history and human history more broadly, while creating something genuinely new. It takes familiar elements and recombines them in unexpected ways, producing a story that feels both comfortably recognizable and excitingly fresh. As long as readers remain interested in superhero stories, in alternate histories, in seeing familiar characters from new angles, Marvel 1602 will continue finding audiences. Its preservation as part of Marvel's multiverse means it can always be revisited, expanded, connected to new stories. The pocket universe of Earth 311 exists, persistent and enduring, a testament to the power of storytelling and the enduring appeal of heroes who transcend time itself. So we return to where we began. A world of candlelight and sailing ships, of religious persecution and political intrigue, of heroes arising centuries before they should exist. We have journeyed through the creation and history of Marvel 1602, explored its characters and themes, examined its connections to larger continuity and its cultural impact. We have seen how Nicholas Fury sacrificed everything to save reality, how Virginia Dare lost the guardian she loved to preserve the universe, how heroes of different kinds united against common threats. We have witnessed how Neil Gaiman took familiar Marvel characters and reimagined them so completely that they felt like new discoveries while remaining recognizably themselves. We have appreciated how the art team of Andy Kubert, Richard Ezanov, and Scott McCowan brought this alternate world to vivid, beautiful life through pencils, digital painting, and scratchboard engraving. we have followed the story through its original series and multiple sequels, seeing how other creators built upon Gaiman's foundation. The marvel of Marvel 1602, if you'll forgive the wordplay, is how it demonstrates that heroism is not bound by time or circumstance. Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man whether he lives in the 21st century or the 17th, whether he gains his powers from a radioactive spider in a laboratory or a mutated spider at a temporal rift. Charles Xavier seeks to prove that those born different can coexist peacefully with the majority, whether he's Professor X running a school for mutants or Carlos Javier sheltering Witchbreed from the Inquisition. Nick Fury serves and protects, Reed Richards explores and discovers, Matthew Murdock seeks justice despite his blindness, and Doctor Strange practices both medicine and magic. These characters are who they are not because of the specific circumstances of their origins, but because of fundamental characteristics that persist across contexts. They are heroes because they choose to be, because they possess qualities, courage, compassion, determination, intelligence, selflessness that manifest as heroism regardless of when or where they live. The villains similarly reveal their true natures across timelines. Doom seeks power and knowledge at any cost. Magneto despairs of peaceful coexistence and embraces force. The Goblin descends into madness and malevolence. Their specific schemes and methods adapt to their circumstances, but the fundamental drives and flaws that make them villainous remain constant. This suggests something profound about identity and character. We are shaped by our circumstances, certainly. The person Peter Parker becomes depends partly on whether he grows up in modern New York or colonial America. But something essential persists across variations, something that makes Peter Parker himself rather than someone else. Marvel 1602 explores this tension between essence and context throughout its narrative. The story also reminds us that heroism requires sacrifice. Jean Grey gives her life for her friends and teacher. Nicholas Fury surrenders his entire existence to save the Lalit universe. Doctor Strange continues serving even after execution. Rojas, though unconscious for the final choice, is exiled from the time and people he loves because reality demands it. These sacrifices matter. They have meaning and consequence. The universe survives because heroes were willing to pay its price. Yet the story is not simply dark or tragic. It is also about hope, about the dream that different peoples can coexist peacefully, that prejudice can be overcome, that individual actions can matter even against cosmic-scale threats. Carlos Javier's school may be attacked and scattered, but his dream persists. The Witchbreed continue seeking acceptance and demonstrating through their actions that they deserve it. Peter Parker gains powers and will use them to help others, continuing the eternal cycle of heroism. The preservation of Earth 311 as a pocket universe represents a kind of redemption. The accident that created this timeline, Rojas' temporal displacement, could have destroyed everything. Instead, it led to the creation of an entire universe populated by billions of people living real lives. Yes, correcting the temporal paradox required painful sacrifices, but the outcome was not erasure but preservation, not loss but transformation. The pocket universe continues, and everyone in it matters. For us as readers, Marvel 1602 offers a complete, satisfying narrative that explores familiar characters in unfamiliar ways. It rewards knowledge of Marvel history while remaining accessible to newcomers. It respects history while using it as a foundation for fantasy and adventure. It addresses serious themes while remaining entertaining and exciting. It is, in short, superhero storytelling at its finest, demonstrating the genre's capacity for depth, complexity, and artistic achievement. As we close this exploration of the 1602 universe, we leave behind a world that continues existing in that pocket of reality where Marvel heroes arose 4 centuries early. Peter Parker is learning to use his spider powers, swinging through colonial settlements and protecting the innocent. Virginia Dare transforms into white-furred creatures, honoring Rajhaz's memory through her continued heroism. The Fantastic Four search for solutions to their transformations while facing new adventures. Carlos Javier rebuilds his dream of peaceful coexistence in new soil. And somewhere, in the far future of Earth 3111, Nicholas Fury and Steve Rogers emerged from their journey through time. What they found there, what they did, whether they changed anything or simply continued the struggle they had always waged, we do not know. But we can imagine that they remained heroes, that they faced whatever dystopian tyranny awaited them with the same courage and determination they showed in 1602. Because that is who they are, in any time, in any place. The story of Marvel 1602 reminds us that the best in us, our capacity for courage and compassion and sacrifice, transcends time and circumstance. Heroes are not made by radiation or cosmic rays, by magic spells or genetic mutations. These things may grant powers, but they do not create heroism. That comes from within, from choices made in moments that matter, from deciding to stand up rather than stand by, to protect rather than exploit, to sacrifice for others rather than sacrifice others for ourselves. In an age of candlelight, before the modern world with its technology and complexity, these eternal truths manifested as clearly as they ever have. And in witnessing them, in following the adventures of heroes in an impossible time, we remember what heroism truly means. We remember that it is timeless, as relevant in 1602 as in 2024, as necessary in fiction as in life. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world where Marvel took place in the Renaissance, where Captain America's shield was forged in the 16th century, and Spider-Man swung through colonial settlements, I hope you'll hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We'll continue exploring the lore of games, movies, comics, and the fascinating stories that emerge when creators take familiar elements and reimagine them completely. The multiverse is vast, containing infinite possibilities and infinite stories, and we're here to explore them all, one tale at a time. Until next time, remember, heroes are not defined by when they live, but by what they choose to do with the time they are given. And in that sense, we all have the potential for heroism, regardless of our circumstances, regardless of our era. We simply have to choose it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.